We're recording it now. And so our plan is that we will play the clip and have an informal just catch up when I stop screen sharing after the clip. And then from about 9:30 to 10 o'clock, Jackie, Farzana from Bangladesh, and of course, Udena from Sri Lanka will talk about autism and autism spectrum disorder related projects that have been going on over the past year. So today is focusing very much on research and what's been happening despite COVID and despite us not having met face-to-face for nearly, well, for 2 years effectively. We are a vibrant community and stuff has been going on. I'm delighted to then say that we'll have a couple of our early career researcher projects. Very proud of this because we've got true collaboration between registrars and in child psychiatry from the UK and fellows in child psychiatry from NIMHANS in Bangalore. So these are 2 projects which they will update you on. Unfortunately, there won't be any results, but they will tell you where the projects are at to showcase the kinds of projects that we have ongoing and think about other projects that we might want to have under the auspices of NEESAMA, sort of similar projects. Then I'll hand over to Paul. Paul is going to be terribly jet lagged. Poor chap's just come back from Canada from holiday. And Paul's going to talk about a project that he's doing with the Public Health Foundation of India under the auspices of NEESAMA and colleagues at Newcastle University looking at bizarre fixed drug combinations in psychotropics in India. We'll take a break and then I'll hand over to Stella and Richard to talk about projects to do with old age, because I know there's work going on. And then we'll take another break and then end with the Cope with COVID project, which some of you are aware of. And really that is the limit of I can now just find the film in a second. And I have found it. And here we are.
Hello everyone, it's nice to be back with the NEESAMA community once again. The past 2 years have been eventful for me. I've moved over from Colombo, the capital, to Kandy, which is in the middle of the country, and I work at the Children's Hospital over there now. So being in the middle of the country, I have an opportunity to work with diverse communities all around the country who come to this hospital. And also there's not been a child psychiatrist there for some time. So I think service-wise, I think I get to do a lot more. And on a personal note, I think Kandy is my hometown, so it's very familiar to me. And I get to be close to my parents, and it's easier to explore the island being in the middle of the country.
Hi NEESAMA family, this is Ramsreen Diseva, clinical psychologist and ECR from Sri Lanka. It's really nice to see you all since Dhaka in 2019. Since then, during the past 2 years, the NEESAMA ECR community have remained in touch and continue to grow in strength, supporting each other both professionally and personally while supporting the NEESAMA initiatives as well. On my end, I have continued with my teaching duties as a senior lecturer at the Faculty of Health Sciences at the Open University here in Sri Lanka, and also making progress facing challenges because of the pandemic related to my PhD work on social anxiety disorder among university students in Sri Lanka. I'm also a proud collaborator for the NEESAMA's very own Cope with COVID study, and I look forward to much more future collaborations in the future and a very interesting NEESAMA conference this year.
Hi everyone. I'm sorry, I'm really bad at making these videos, so please excuse if there's any background noise or if you hear cats meowing in the background, because I'm currently living with 2 cats and they don't get along. Anyhow, I'm doing fine. I'm really excited to see all of you on the 19th and the 20th, of course, virtually. Well, but I think that's how it is these days. I will quickly speak about my experiences in the pandemic. Most of my work focused on my PhD work. I've managed to finish my data collection, do my data analysis, and I'm currently writing my thesis, and I managed to publish a paper as well. On the NEESAMA front, I participated in the child psychodynamic psychotherapy course, which was really good. I can already see that the time is running out. So I'll close it here and I'll see you all very soon. Bye-bye.
Hello and Assalamu alaikum. This is Asha Siddiqa from Bangladesh. I'm an educational psychologist and right now working as a psychotherapist and a lecturer in psychology at Prague University, a renowned university of our country, and a proud member of NEESAMA family. If you ask me about the last 2 years, were really challenging for me because most of my family members, including me, were COVID positive, and we have lost one of our family members also. And, along with all the hardships, the last 2 years also gave me the opportunity to learn how to adapt with the challenging time, and as a psychotherapist, how I can support myself and my clients. From the very beginning of lockdown in our country, I'm providing the online individual counseling support, also organized different webinars, workshops, family counseling sessions, group counseling sessions for my students, parents, faculties, and other members of my institution. I, along with my team members, launched the peer support group program in the university so that the students can get the easy accessibility for the mental health support. I also attended different webinars arranged by NEESAMA and other organizations. I organized different Facebook Lives with different mental health experts to create the awareness regarding the significance of mental health and how people can take care of their mental health. And here I'm really grateful to Shekhar sir because he was also an honorable guest of one of our episodes. I have attended different trainings and become the national trainer to give the training to the teachers how they can provide the mental health first aid to the students after reopening the educational institutions. And I also involved with the COVID research with NEESAMA and in-house research with my institution regarding the mental health crisis during this pandemic period among the young adults and how counseling support can be helpful to deal with those crises. To cut the long story in short, the last 2 years were full of learning and exploring different dimensions of human feelings and trying out different coping strategies to deal with the stresses in a productive way and taking care of myself and my community. Thank you so much.
Namaste. I'm Gunjan Doju from Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Unit at Children's Hospital. Hope you and your family have been well. Pandemic, besides the regular OPD services, we started something called Identification and Management of COVID-19 related child and adolescent mental health problems. This was an online-based intervention where we trained mental health professionals, and they in turn conducted sessions for children, parents, teachers, caregivers, among others. And we were able to reach around 70,000 until now, and plan to reach 80 by the end of November. Besides this, we've also continued with the community child and adolescent mental health training for doctors and paramedical professionals. So we've conducted a few of them during this pandemic time when the travel restrictions were a bit light. So that's it from me. I hope everyone has been well. Take care.
Good afternoon. Greetings to all NEESAMA members. last 2 years have been very hectic and challenging to all professionals we know, especially mental health professional. And we were involved with clinical work. We continued our services through teleconsultation and regular OPDs, and also inpatient care was provided to all psychiatric patients. Other than this, I was involved with many webinar lectures through online mode and CME, which were there for general public, different organizations, and also to mental health professional. Other than this, we had developed the IEC material to like short video films and audio films for general public. Then we had developed few guidance document and guidelines and training modules for Ministry of Health and ICMR, which can be used in future. And we hope to continue our work. Thank you very much, wherever you are.
Friends, it's been a long time since we met in Dhaka. Well, I've been busy running my latest initiative for the last 1 year in the time of the pandemic, a national initiative and integrated resource for child protection, mental health, and psychosocial care all across the country in all 29 states, working in 4 verticals: child protection, mental health, education, policy and law. I also retired this year, so I'm looking forward to doing more work with NEESAMA and many of my other collaborators. I hope all of you have been safe and healthy.
Hello everyone, my name is Sobia Masood. I am a PhD researcher at the University of Melbourne, Australia, and my work is looking at the conceptualization of child victim sexual offending in Pakistan. I have finished my data collection, which had to be structured to kind of incorporate the effects of COVID, and now I'm in the process of analyzing my data. I'm using the interpretive phenomenological analysis, which is interesting because it's not used as widely in criminology, which is my field, and I'll be writing a paper on this and presenting it in an upcoming conference in December. I look forward to seeing all of you in the NEESAMA conference on the 19th and 20th, and it will be nice to check in with everybody again. See you then. Goodbye.
I just have to say a huge thanks to all of you that came on camera, gave us your time. I can see so many people with their digital. I'm a little bit speechless, really, and quite emotional. So I don't know. Perhaps I'm going to hand over to Jackie to just say maybe a little bit. Yeah, just I'm gobsmacked, really.
Yeah, me too. So thanks for that, Adi. Yeah, I feel really emotional seeing everyone again and hearing how everything's been, and it's just wonderful that to be together again, even virtually. And I think it's quite significant that it's almost 2 years to the day since we were all together in Bangladesh, and hopefully it won't be too long before we can all do that again. But thanks for coming today, and looking forward to seeing you all soon, and also hearing about what's been happening over the next couple of days. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. I have to say, one of the things that we probably need to celebrate is all of us staying well. I know a huge thanks to folk for pointing out that we've all lost loved ones along the way. So I think perhaps it seems befitting that we remember them at this conference, and we let them not be forgotten. You're very welcome if your bandwidth allows, and I can see quite a few. Just delighted because Shekhar and I caught up briefly yesterday, and Jackie and I caught up a few weeks ago, and we weren't quite sure how many of you would be able to attend. Everybody's so busy, and I have to say, there's 23 of you at the moment, which is just phenomenal. Some friends of old, sorry, I should be careful about my use of language, some friends of old and some new colleagues as well. Did anybody, we've got a few minutes before we hand over to Jackie, Udena, and Fazana for updates on autism. Did anybody want to say anything? Shekhar, did you want to get us started?
Well, Adi, it's been an eventful 2 years, and I think through the COPE study and our other professional, I think, communication, we have managed to stay in touch, as well as with the kind of collaborative research that we're doing together. I'm actually happy to hear that Mia will take care of the website, because I see it's almost ready, except for some parts which says El Locium Responde, and all that needs to. So Mia, in case you need any assistance, my IT team would be happy to really work with you and put this together. I recognize that some of us have struggled with COVID and loss, as Adi pointed out, it's since the lockdown last year, and considering that most of us are vaccinated, things seem to be opening out. The threatened third wave didn't occur. Will the fourth wave, which is likely to be a mental health wave, occur or not? We don't know. So these are some thoughts which I think are important for NEESAMA to table as a context to really animate and energize our work going ahead. Because what the post-COVID world is going to be like as far as mental health is concerned is very difficult to predict. One last issue, particularly for those interested in children. This is a research agenda. I know that this would interest Jackie. See, if a kid is 1 month old or 2 months old, in any case, they are at home, that's okay. The 15, 16-year-olds manage to find their own outlets for their frustration and predicament. I'm particularly concerned about 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds. What about their developmental trajectories? We have an opportunity here, friends, to look at some really robust research, which is evolutionary psychology, to look at what this pandemic and the lockdown is going to do 2 years, 5 years from now for these children, the immediate preschoolers. Just a thought that I felt I should share with you. Adi.
No, thank you, Shekhar. I have, as you all know, been, of Indian origin. I have extensive family there, and I have nephews and nieces that are growing up and have not been to school for 18 months. And it really worries me. Of course, I think, Shekhar, you're absolutely right to talk about preschoolers. And I still remember your words about the spaces that children occupy. And it's those lack of spaces. They're not getting out to parks. They're not getting out. And schools, I know schools in India are gradually just about starting to reopen, and I don't mean to be politically incorrect, weddings have been allowed to proceed, whereas schools have remained shut. So where is the prioritization? But that's for another day. And I don't mean to be, I really do not want to upset anybody's sensibilities, but as you can tell, really passionate about children and adolescents' mental health and trajectories, as Shekhar pointed out. And that is the key priority. What I suggest we do is we perhaps move on a little bit earlier than planned, but I hope that's okay, Jackie, Fazana, and Udena. We start a little bit earlier, and that might allow us some time for extended discussion. But we will take breaks as planned, because I think it's very hard to sustain attention on Zoom and Teams. We all get fatigued. So we'll aim to finish at the latest by 10. If needed, of course, we can come back to those discussions later on during the day. So I'll hand over to our lovely colleagues, Jackie, of course, my partner in crime, Fazana from Bangladesh, and Udena. Over to you, Jackie.
Thanks, Adi. Fazana, Udena, and I thought that we might share with you this morning some work that we've been doing over the last 2 years around autism and anxiety. So I've got a few kind of introductory slides just to set the scene a little bit, and then I'll hand over to Fazana and Udena to share with you the work that they've been involved in their countries. And then hopefully there'll be a little bit of time at the end in case anyone would like to ask any questions. So let me just share my screen. Okay, hopefully, excuse me, everyone can see that. Oops. I'm a bit trigger happy. Okay, so the work that we're going to focus on just for this wee while this morning is has been born out of discussions that we had almost 2 years ago to the day when we were in beautiful Bangladesh. And I think it was the afternoon of the second day that we were there, and we were sitting around, I can remember it vividly, sitting around a round table in the hotel and talking about ideas for future plans and work that we could do together. And Fazana and Udena and I, with colleagues, had some really interesting conversations about how we might begin to move things forward for autistic children who are experiencing anxiety. It's, I think, fair to say that maybe we haven't come as far as we wanted to, planned to, and hoped to because of COVID. But progress has still been made. So this is very much a work in progress, but hopefully you'll see by the end of the short session today that we have plans in place and hope to be able to continue with this really important collaboration as the world begins hopefully to open up again. So just for those of you who are not so familiar with autism, just to remind you that it is a lifelong neurodevelopmental condition, which is clinically defined by a combination of difficulties with social communication and the presence of restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior, including sensory processing differences. Of course, we know that autistic people differ very much from one another. There's extreme heterogeneity in terms of the core clinical features and associated neurocognitive profile, which needs to be taken into account when thinking about identification of co-occurring conditions and also the application of interventions. Sadly, over the last 10 to 15 years or so, it's become very apparent in the research literature that autistic children and adults experience high rates of comorbidities, particularly mental health conditions. And that's where my work and my research focuses. And most of the work that I've done in the UK has focused on understanding anxiety for autistic children and adults. And we know that anxiety is one of the most common mental health conditions experienced by autistic people, although the rates vary quite significantly depending upon which research paper you're reading. And you can see just from the statistics on the screen there that there's wide variability in terms of rates. And of course, that's impacted to some extent by the questions that you ask and how you determine whether anxiety is present. And our work has indicated over the past 5 years or so that there's a high likelihood that for some autistic people, anxiety presents somewhat differently from the traditional understandings of the presentation of anxiety that we may glean from DSM and from ICD-10, and that we need to think really carefully about how we identify anxiety experienced by autistic children and adults. And some of the tools that have been used in this previous research have been developed for neurotypical individuals and may not be as relevant, as valid and as reliable with autistic people. So on the basis of that, with some funding from a small UK-based charity, about 5 or 6 years ago now, our team developed an anxiety screening tool specifically for autistic children, validated with children and their parents. And that's called the Anxiety Scale for Children, ASD. It has a parallel parent and child version with 24 items in each and 4 subscales that have been derived through our large validation study. Evaluation by our group and now thankfully by others independent of our group is beginning to provide good kind of indication of reliability and validity for the original English version and also some translated versions. If anyone's interested in the scale, it's free to download from our website. The link is there, or just email me and I can put you in touch with it. We also now have a teacher version and there's also a corresponding scale for autistic adults, a self-report scale. So since its original publication, the Ask-ASD has been translated into over 20 different languages, and those that are relevant, I think, to NEESAMA, you can see on the screen there. So we now have versions of the Ask-ASD in Hindi, Urdu, Tamil, Sinhala, Bangla, Farsi, and Kurdish, as well as a number of European translations. And it's thanks to collaborations through NEESAMA that some of these translations have been possible. So I'm very grateful to the NEESAMA community for those opportunities. And these translated versions are also free to download from our website. And Fazana will talk to us a little bit in a moment about her experiences of being involved in the translation of the Ask-ASD in her country. And I thought it was useful for us to share that experience in case others within the NEESAMA community are interested. And I'd be very happy to hear from anyone who is about translating the tool into their languages. So some top tips from Susanna on how to go about doing that. Of course, the other thing we need to think about in relation to anxiety and autism is how to support autistic children who are experiencing anxiety. And there's a wealth of research now that indicates that working with and through parents may be a really helpful process to engage in when trying to reduce anxiety experienced by autistic children. And there are a number of reasons for that. So as we know, autistic children will have difficulties with generalizing information across situations, and parents, if they've been involved in interventions, can scaffold that generalization, can help to encourage young people to use skills and strategies at home in other settings when therapists aren't around, can develop a good kind of shared emotional vocabulary to enable the child to be able to describe their difficulties, and ensure consistency across settings, hopefully. So we're involved in a number of intervention programs in the UK to address anxiety by autistic children. And working with Udena and Fazana, we're hoping to be able to develop some parallel parent-mediated intervention programs, initially in Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, and then hopefully in other NEESAMA countries. So Udena is going to talk to us a little bit about the first steps towards doing that, which is to do some co-production with parents in Sri Lanka, and his team ran some focus groups pre-COVID to get the ball rolling. We're hoping to pick that work up again as we begin to be able to work more directly with clients. So that's the scene setting. We're going to hear a little bit about the translation of the Ask-ASD and then about some kind of initial steps towards the development of parent-mediated interventions. So I'll stop sharing now and hand over to Fazana so that she can talk to us about the translation of the Ask-ASD. Thanks, Fazana.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jackie Rogers, and our NEESAMA family for giving me the opportunity to share my experiences from Bangladesh. And I'm really grateful and thankful to Professor Jackie Rogers. Can you hear me all?
Yeah, loud and clear, Fazana, and see you very well.
Yes, very clearly. Go ahead.
Thank you. And I'm really grateful and thankful to the developer of this instrument, who is Professor Jackie Rogers and her team, for giving us the permission to go in the process of translation and validation of this instrument for Bangladeshi children, or the in Bangla and in who are following this culture. Let me share my screen. Is it okay now? Is it shared?
Yes.
Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay.
Now you can go to full share, full screen.
To the slideshow, right?
Yeah. There you are. Fantastic.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for helping me. And all thanks goes to Professor Jackie Rogers and her team for helping us in this process. And let me share my experiences, what we have faced during this translation process. We have done a very little bit of work, but we are very hopeful that with your cooperation, we shall be able to proceed in a good speed, since COVID is, I think it is going away, or it is the intensity or the fear has been reduced at least. And we can see the flow of patients, flow of children, families are coming, is increasing, and especially they are coming with all the mental health problems, and especially about the case of, in the case of autism spectrum disorder, the families are so helpless and distressed that they are not getting help. So the pressure has been is increased to the institutions who are working with these children. And now we have, what we have done, we have translated and back translated this tool, the anxiety scale for children, for the children with ASD. Parent version, we have completed this part only, and it has been done following the Priestley translation model, and we followed the WHO guidelines. And what in this process we have approached, we proceeded a bit informally, and we have approached our family and friends who are bilingual and who have good knowledge in English and Bengali, and also in psychology, but they are not working professionally in this field. And our experiences during this translation was, at first, we found it difficult in finding a translator who is experienced or professional in translating these psychological measures. So we went to our family and friends who happily volunteered, but we faced some troubles like this. That actually we did not ask for any funding first, and that's why it happened. We did not go for any professional translator. Then first, the translation into Bengali was accepted after 3 attempts from 3 different persons. And when the back translation into English was sent to the developers, it did not match the real meaning of the question in 5 different attempts from another set of volunteers. They were 2 in number. And then we approached a 6th person for revisiting the Bangla translation again, when the researchers were not able to catch the real meaning in English in the original ASD. And our translators struggled through the words in Bangla, which meant alike, but was not able to capture the meaning in English. That means we struggled through the semantic equivalence. And the literal meaning was not matching the emotional meaning of the questions. Now, what is our plan? The approved pre-final Bangla translation of ACAST parent version has been done, and we are in the process of doing the child version now, and they will be administered on 50 families who have children with autism between the 6 and 18 years old, and they are coming to our clinics regularly. We have more families, but what we have selected these families because they are approachable, and they will be invited for pilot testing. And then feedbacks will be obtained with cognitive interviewing, just as Dr. Udena at Sri Lanka has done, and he will show you in his studies. And then the next phase will be cross-validation of the Bengali version of this ACAST questionnaire. And for this, I hope we have researchers and the early career researchers, we can take help from them. We are very hopeful. And then our vision is to develop an anxiety intervention program in the end for the children with autism spectrum disorder with this age range with Bangladeshi culture. So if you ask what is my learning experience, take up from this work is in the process of validating any instrument which is developed in another culture. I have realized that how much emphasis needs to be placed on their translation to ensure the conceptual validity. And a clear research methodology must be in place at first, and a well-planned and a careful selection of translator is needed where we have struggled, who have previous experience in translation of these measures or who are professional translators. And research must be planned in collaboration with potential users. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jackie. And I'm so grateful indeed for your great cooperation at every step. Thank you.
And indeed, thank you, Fazana, and your team for working so hard, and working back and forth with our group in Newcastle to get it right. And of course, now the preliminary version is available on our website if anyone wants to look at it. If we may, we'll take questions at the end and maybe kind of move on to hear from Udena now. And then if anyone has questions for either Fazana or Udena or myself, then we can pick those up after Udena's presentation. So I'll hand over to you, Udena.
Thank you, Jackie. Everyone, after a long time, can you see the presentation?
Not yet, Udena.
Now? Can you see it now?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. Just needs to be on slideshow, that's all.
So I think what happened was, in our case, the translation of the questionnaire, and we just started to move on to the next stage, and that's when the COVID started happening, and we couldn't progress as much as we would have wanted to. So just to give some background, I mean, it was really good to have Jackie involved in this. So to kind of have a an expert in autism, which I'm not, involved in this, because I think in Sri Lanka there's a great need to develop services around autism, and a lot of us are getting involved in these development of these services out of necessity, because we get a lot of patients or children with autism spectrum disorder issues. So an interesting thing was when you talk about anxiety, I mean, at least for me, I can't think of a commonly used term for anxiety that would be useful to use in children in Sri Lanka, mostly in Sinhala, which I use more commonly, that would capture the kind of the broad meaning of anxiety as given in English. So we have verbs, they seem to capture only certain dimensions, or it seem to overlap with other aspects. A commonly used word we call, buyer, that would be more similar to scare in English. So kind of having a questionnaire or a question identify this particular issue was very helpful. I mean, it's similar with depression as well. There's no commonly used term for depression, so commonly used term. So people tend to use very descriptive terms. So description seems to be give us a more accurate idea about depression rather than a single term. So moving on, and this anxiety thing, identifying it is made more difficult in the context of autism, because there might be situations where the children are non-verbal and parents are unable to kind of express what is going on. So having ASD was really helpful, and it also kind of gives us an option to kind of identify this category we call anxiety. The other thing was, I don't think we have always kind of looked at depression in children with autism, learning difficulties, but looking at anxiety specifically was also a kind of a new thing, because we were looking more at distress in a broader sense and looking at interventions to address this distress. So, as this project progresses, I'm wondering whether, the hope is really that identifying anxiety will give us interest that will be useful for this population. So we had a kind of a parent focus group to find out what parents would think about having an intervention for anxiety, what their ideas would be, and whether they could actually identify how anxiety presents for their children. So we translated during these focus group sessions, and what we found out was when you actually give them an idea and a set of questions to kind of help them identify something, that most of them did actually identify anxiety in their children, and the kind of behavioral manifestations that they thought were linked to this anxiety were the ones that are the ones that are given on the slide. And they were all very keen to attend a program that would help their children with anxiety. And looking at the local weekdays were more convenient for parents. And so I think what we found out was programs that were of a shorter duration were better, because both parents would usually be working, and sometimes they would be daily wage earners, and losing a day's earnings would be difficult, especially in these times. So in a practical sense, if we were to have a program as such, it would have to be brief and kind of tailored to the practical situations we currently see here. So again, parents were kind of able to identify when their children felt anxious. In most cases, we felt that some of these situations kind of might not be, very culturally relevant. So again, looking back, I think maybe at a later step we can look at, when we look at maybe validating the questionnaire, making it more culturally valid at some point. From our current experiences, the question is still very useful. I mean, one thing was that none of the patients responded to their children feeling anxious when they don't know what will happen, when kind of plans change. So from a cultural perspective, again, we felt that, parents were not really looking at on this uncertainty, the need for consistency for autistic children. As we were moving along, we were also understanding, the deficits in maybe our cultural understanding of autism that kind of prevents us from, looking at certain things that make children anxious. So that was also part of our experience. So I'll just leave you with a picture, because I think a picture says many more things we can say. So this is a picture of a group that we did. It was the early part of the COVID pandemic. We were all taking precautions as much as we could. I think the next steps would be really interesting, having an intervention, because that would be a very practical thing and something that would be really useful for all the autistic children. So I'm looking forward to working on that with Jackie and Farzana in the future.
Thank you so much, Udena. You're absolutely right. We learn so much from actually working with parents and talking to parents, far more than we would ever learn if we didn't do that. In terms of next steps, really excited to be able to let you know, to let everyone know, but particularly Farzana and Udena, that we in Newcastle have managed to secure some funding from the Wellcome Trust and from a UK-based autism charity called Autistica to support one of my very dear colleagues, Priyanka Robb, who's on the call. Priyanka, if you can put your camera on, that would be great. Priyanka will now be able to work on this collaboration alongside some work we're doing around uncertainty in schools in the UK. And she'll be able to work on it for 2.5 days a week for the next year or so, till the end of 2022. So that gives us a good chunk of time to be able to try and move forward with some of the fantastic work that you've both started in Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. And she will be ably assisted by Amy Fisher-Rogers. So Amy, if you could put your camera on. Amy is a psychology placement student who is working in our research group until the end of this academic year. I thought Amy was on the call, but maybe she isn't. So Farzana and Udena, Priyanka will be in touch. She starts this work on the 1st of November, so not long to wait now. And we will get the ball rolling again, and we will keep going with this work because it's super important. So I'm excited to see how far we can get in the next 12 months or so with your help. Adi, do we have time for any questions?
Yes, we do have a few minutes. I just wanted to say fantastic effort, guys. And Amy is on the call, Jackie, and she's just put on the chat that due to Wi-Fi issues, she can't get her camera working. There's time for some questions, just a couple of minutes. I wondered if some of our other collaborators, I mean, we've got work going on in Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, whether there's any interest and appetite from Nepal or from India or from Pakistan in this effort, because it might be, I mean, I can't speak for Jackie and the team, but it might be nice to have
the
Shekhar, I think we're having some bandwidth issues. Maybe if you turn your camera off and just use the audio. Oh, I think we've lost Shekhar for now. Just there's obviously bandwidth issues. Yeah. Okay. Right. So it's just gone 10 a.m. It doesn't look like there's any other hands or questions. Shekhar's back. Shekhar,
sorry. Yep.
In the interests of time, Gunjan is saying he'll talk to his team in Kathmandu, an important resource for Nepal as well. So fantastic. Gunjan, just get in touch with Jackie. I'm sure she'd be delighted. She and the team would be delighted. Shekhar, very quickly, just because we are keen to stick to time and take the break when planned, but over to you.
No sweat, just very small observation. Murli told me that when the footfalls in Nimhans were 1,300 pre-COVID, after the second wave, it's 2,000 a day. So people have started coming, and in child psychiatry, kids with autism, with increased behavioral manifestations are increasingly coming. So I have a feeling that if you look at the prevalence of anxiety in autism spectrum, during the lockdown, you're likely to have findings that they're substantially higher than they were pre-lockdown. That's the point I wanted to make.
No, thank you, Shekhar. Is there, perhaps you could mention it within the Nimhans Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Department to see if there's anyone who'd like to get in touch with Jackie to see if we could try and do some of this work, adapting the measures or the parenting intervention. Just seems like a great opportunity. Thanks, Shekhar. Anecdotally, we too in the UK, I'm sure Ellie will back me up. When we're on call, it's kids with autism spectrum disorder who are presenting in psychiatric emergencies. They are, their behavioral issues, the externalizing problems are extremely manifest, and they're sometimes presenting quite late because parents are asking for help, but due to the pressure on services, it's not forthcoming at an appropriate time. And a lot of these kids are then unfortunately having to come into hospital, whereas perhaps that's not the best place for them. So we are seeing this, even in the UK, and it's a real issue. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Farzana, and your entire team in Bangladesh. And of course, Udena, thank you to your team in Sri Lanka. Thank you for sharing your experiences. We'll take a 10-minute break and hopefully see you back just after 10:10. And then we'll have our early career researchers talk about some of the reviews that are ongoing. See you soon. Hi, Kavita. It's so lovely to see you. How are you doing?
Hi, Adi. It's nice to see you too. I'm doing good.
Yeah, and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Is he sleeping, behaving himself? I apologize. Yeah.
That's okay. My husband is there at home at the moment, so he has to go to work a little late today. That's how we're managing.
Oh, bless. Okay. Yeah. And Tess, any movement, any dates, anything yet?
Yeah, it's probably be in end of Jan.
End of Jan when you, okay.
That's what we are expecting.
Yeah. Just, yeah, keep me posted. Looking forward to it. Yeah.
And I'm yet to hear from them a date.
I think these things take time and everything's moving slowly at the moment, Tess, because of, unfortunately, I know Shekhar mentioned that hopefully there won't be a third or fourth wave, but our cases in the UK are going up, sadly. Yesterday were 49,000 cases. So, you know, cases are going up, sadly. I really hope that the UK does not have, I've even lost count of which wave, but I hope we don't have another wave. Hi, Paul, welcome. So thanks, guys. Thanks, Paul, for turning your camera on, just so people can see you. Paul's, he's going to be speaking in just a little while, but Paul is terribly jet lagged, and he had a surprise waiting for in his inbox when he returned back from Canada, having visited family, when he found an email from me asking him to present. So, so apologies, Paul, but as you can probably tell, it's a very relaxed, informal group of folk. So I'm going to hand over. I'm just delighted by these two projects that you're going to hear about. I mean, really, today is about showcasing what can be achieved if we all put our minds to it. I think Jackie, Farzana and Udena have showcased that by the wonderful work that they're doing in the field of autism spectrum disorder, adapting scales to make sure that they are appropriate for that, and adapting parent and family mediated interventions as well for children with anxiety and in the context of autism. So, as you all know, one of my main areas of interest is mood disorders in young people, early onset mood disorders. Delighted to invite Kavita Nagpal. Kavita is from India originally, like me. She did her MD from NIMHANS and then came to the UK to train. She's currently an ST5, which is she's about halfway through her, no, actually not halfway through. Yeah, in fact, you haven't finished your first year of training in child and adolescent psychiatry in the UK. She's currently on maternity leave, having had a beautiful baby girl in May, who I think is the youngest addition, hopefully, to the NEESAMA family. When I proposed this idea to Shekhar, that we have a registrar from the UK and a registrar or a fellow in child psychiatry from India do collaborative work, he proposed to us the wonderful Tess Rajan. And what a wonderful gift that was, one that Shekhar keeps giving, many gifts. So I'm going to give the floor over to Tess and Kavita. They're going to talk about the impact of childhood adversity. So this is a rapid review that we're doing on childhood maltreatment and mood disorders. I'll hand the floor to them just to sort of say the work is ongoing, so there won't be too much in terms of results just yet, but it's to showcase what we can achieve. Over to Kavita and Tess.
Thank you so much, Adi, and you've already introduced me and Tess, so I'll just move on and talk about the research project. So what we're going to do is, it's a rapid review on childhood maltreatment and mood disorder. Next slide, Tess, please. And for this review, I'm getting supervision mainly from, me and Tess are getting supervision mainly from Dr. Adi and Dr. Shekhar, but also from other colleagues like Dr. Lynn Barron-Miller. She was a PhD scholar working with Newcastle University. I'm not sure where she's working at the moment. Dr. Ellie, also from Dr. Stewart, and Dr. Catherine Richmond. She's an information specialist who has helped us in the search strategy about which I'll be talking. Next slide, please. Yeah, so talking about the research title. So in this study, we are looking at the relationship between childhood maltreatment and development of both unipolar and bipolar mood disorder in young people. And we have taken people till the age of 30 years. And it is going to be a systematic search and a rapid review of, we would only be including prospective studies. And I would come to next as to why we think of including only the prospective study in the current project. Next slide, please, Des. So the research question on which we reached after having a series of discussion with our mentors, with our supervisors for this research project is, what is the relationship between childhood maltreatment, which we've defined as, or which is defined as, which is something which includes sexual, physical, emotional abuse and or neglect in the first 18 years of life, and the risk of developing age at onset, pattern of, and severity of unipolar and bipolar mood disorders in children, adolescents, and young adults till the age group of 30 years using prospective studies. Next slide, please, Tess. So just talking about why we got involved in this research, or mainly about why we plan to take prospective studies. So when me and Tess did a baseline search, we noted that there have been some similar reviews that had been done in the past, which were looking at the relationship between childhood maltreatment and mood disorders. But most of these reviews were from, had included cross-sectional studies, and there was retrospective reporting of childhood maltreatment. But as we all know, the retrospective studies have a lot of bias involved in them. So there could be recall or reporting bias, or sometimes there are sampling bias. And prospective studies, on the other hand, are more reliable in terms of providing a temporal sequence of events. And in general, prospective studies give more robust evidence for a causal relationship. So that is why we thought of compiling the relationship between, compiling the evidence for the relationship between childhood maltreatment and mood disorder using prospective studies. Although just to mention that we are not specifically saying that we would be able to get causal relationship through our rapid review, but this is the reason why we thought of including prospective studies instead of retrospective studies. And both me and Tess, and obviously our supervisors, were interested in studying this subject of childhood maltreatment and development of mood disorders. Thank you, Tess. For the next slide, please. So, as I said already, in this rapid review, we would be systematically evaluating prospective studies. So, type of the studies that we would include would be prospective studies, and participant would be children and adolescents who have experienced maltreatment before 18 years and were followed up, and exposure would be maltreatment before 18 years. Next slide, please, Tess. Yeah. And outcome would be occurrence of unipolar and bipolar mood disorders using either DSM or ICD-10 criteria. And we have included DSM we have, just to make sure that we don't miss out studies which were done earlier. We have included studies which have used DSM-3 criteria, 3TR, 4TR, 5, as well as ICD-9 and 10. And as I mentioned already, we would be looking at the risk, age at onset, severity, and pattern of development of mood disorders. Next slide, please. So talking about the progress of work till date. So after doing baseline literature search, we agreed on research question, discussed about methodology and data collection with our supervisor during multiple meetings, and we submitted the plan for our study to Prospero, which was submitted in October 2020. And we were fortunate to get registration after just a single amendment in December 2020. We also prepared application for a grant from Mental Health Foundation Northeast branch, and we were fortunate to get that. Next slide, please, Tess. About the search strategy, as I said, we did a baseline search with various combination of different search terms in different search engines, and we discussed the results with our supervisors in the meeting, got inputs from them, and especially inputs from information specialist Catherine Richmond, who was really helpful. And this is just one example of the search strategy that we had used in Medline. And obviously with other search engine, we modified that a little bit as per the need. Next slide, please. Yeah, so these are the search engines that we use. We use 6 search engines, and this slide also shows the yield that we obtained from each of the search engine. And then we imported all these results into EndNote, did deduplication, and after deduplications, results were exported to Ryan, which is another software for title and abstract screening. And I think I've not mentioned in the beginning, but Tess will take over from here. I had initially meant to mention that in beginning, that I'll be presenting initial half and Tess will take over, but I think I missed that. So yeah, Floor, just Tess, if you could take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Kavita. So I'll continue from where Kavita stopped. So as Kavita mentioned, we had exported the entire title, all the articles that were for title and abstract screening to the software Ryan. So once we exported it to Ryan, we realized that we had to screen around 19,622 titles and abstracts. So when we started the work, we realized that it will be quite tedious to complete it in the given time. And if we go ahead and independently screen all the 19,000 titles, it might hamper the progress of the review by a few months. So we went back and discussed it with our supervisors, and at this stage, we decided to make the review into a rapid review. So the methodology was changed a little bit, and we had applied to Prospero for the change. So as per the methodology for rapid review, in the first stage, both of us independently screened around 20% of the initial of the 19,000 articles against the selection criteria, and at this stage we were blind to each other. And once the 20% was completed, we checked the agreement rate. It was good. It was less than the conflict was less than 10%. And whatever conflicts were there, we resolved it through discussion. So since the agreement rate was good, in the second stage, we divided the rest of the articles between us two, and we did 50%, each of us completed 50% of the title and abstract screening. So all the studies that were included at this stage were to be screened again in the full text screen. And for this, we had referred the Cochrane Rapid Reviews Methods group to follow the methodology. And once we completed, the number of articles that were included for full text screening was 133. So this is the PRISPA flowchart of the work that is done till now. We started off with a search of 36,000. After duplicates were removed, it was 19,000. And once the title and abstract screening was done, finally we are at the stage of full text screening for 133 articles. So now we started the full text screening. To begin the full text screening, we initially collected all the articles and uploaded. So 124 of 133 articles we were able to collect. The rest of the articles we are in the process of contacting the authors to get the text, full text. And we also prepared a review form to do the full text screening so that it would be done in a very systematic way. And the piloting of this review form was also done. I'll show the review form in the next slide. And in the meantime, any article that is being selected once we are doing the full text screening, we are also simultaneously doing the quality assessment using the Newcastle-Ottawa quality assessment scale for cohort studies. So this is just to show you an example. This is the review form for full text screening that we are using. It's in Excel, and this is the checklist. So we'll go through each article. We'll go through the checklist, and finally we'll decide whether to be included or not. And any article that is included, for example, the last one, Mary et al. Was included, we will go to the next step and do the quality assessment. In the meantime, we also prepare the data extraction table and decided that in the data extraction table, the following points will be included: the sample characteristics, place and year of the study, and also about the mood disorder, the age at onset, risk of developing, the severity, the pattern of mood, developing mood disorder. So we have prepared a comprehensive data extraction table to extract the data once we have decided about the text, the articles that will be finally taken up for the review. Although we have not reached this stage, this is our plan for data synthesis. So in any article where relative risk is mentioned, we will take that and will be included as a part of data synthesis. In otherwise, the other risk factors such as severity of symptoms, pattern, type of mood disorder, whatever is mentioned in each article, those aspects will be mentioned in the manuscript in a narrative form. So this is the example. This is a part of our data extraction table for your reference. So it is again in Excel and it's a little long. So I've just included a small part of it. So here you can see the characteristics of the included study. Here is about the participants, and towards the right, we start entering about the mood disorder. And as you can see, we have started entering it. We are in the initial stage of doing this work. So to consolidate our work, this is the Gantt chart of the work completed and the work that is yet to be done. So we have completed the initial part of research question, hospital registration, grant. We have received the grant, the search, title abstract screening has been completed. As you can see, the title abstract screening required a longer time than the rest of the work. After which, in between, due to professional and personal reasons, we had to take a break for a few months, and we have started again. After that, we have almost done with our full text screening in the last 1.5 months. 9 more articles that needs to be uploaded. Other than that, we are at present doing the full text screening, data extraction, planning to do the data synthesis by the next 2 months. Manuscript, we have actually started writing it in March, April. We have completed the Prisma flowchart till the work that is being done, as well as we have also completed writing up the methodology. After that, there was a break, and we plan to restart that work next month, and we aim to complete it by Jan-Feb. That is our aim. We hope to do that. So this is mostly the work done. Apart from that, we have had discussion with our mentors on the target journal that we have to identify so that we can write the manuscript keeping in mind our target journal. So we are aiming to send it to British Journal of Psychiatry, but we'll see as the work progresses. So thank you. This is briefly the work that we have done.
Thanks, Tess. Thanks, Kavita. Really helpful. I wondered if you could stop screen sharing, and I don't see any questions on the chat, but anybody would like to comment or ask any questions about the work? Thanks, Fazana, for your thumbs up. Doesn't sound like it. So well done, guys, for presenting. Really appreciate you coming at short notice. Kavita on her mat leave, and Tess, of course, you are. I won't share the details of what you're up to at the moment, but I know that you both have been very, very busy. I'm going to hand over now to Ranjita and Harshini. Ranjita is a registrar in child and adolescent psychiatry on our Northern scheme as Kavita. And this is another lovely example of joint collaborative work across NEESAMA. Harshini is currently a fellow in child and adolescent psychiatry at NIMHANS, and they're going to talk about their review project on the psychological impact of both psychological impact of and coping mechanisms in children and adolescents of COVID-19. So over to Ranjita and Harshini. And thanks, Ranjita. I know your little one's not very well, so it's really appreciated you coming on. Hope he's better soon. It was fine before, Ranjita, when we had the screen show on.
Sorry, I'm just having a few technical issues. Okay. Can you see my slides?
Yeah, perfect, perfect.
Okay. So thank you for inviting me to present our research. Sorry, I just Okay, so we're looking at, myself and Hashini are looking at investigating the impact of COVID-19 on the mental health of and coping strategies employed by people under the age of 18. I think this is something that is very pertinent at the moment, given the COVID situation and seeing how it's impacting our lives. So the team involved, like I mentioned, it's myself and Hashini and our supervisor, Professor Shaker and Dr. Sharma Addy, who's talking today. So the context really to where this is all coming from is that, as we're all aware, this is a pandemic we're facing that is affecting our patients, ourselves, everybody, but just not on a physical level, but it's impacting the mental health. And there is so much research out there to demonstrate how it is affecting so many aspects of life. And as CAMHS doctors, it's, we can see the implications on the children and the young people that we're seeing on a day-to-day basis. And even towards the very beginning of when COVID was sort of hitting the UK and we were experiencing lockdown, there were already articles showing the prevalence of mental health in children. The things like depression, anxiety, PTSD was already rising. And even in the very early stages, people were writing articles and there was literature out there. So I thought it'd be very interesting to collate that and explore that in further detail. Particular two articles that I found stood out, but there were many, were these two here, O'Reilly and Nearshow. So the first one that I'm alluding to was a rapid review written by O'Reilly and team. This didn't look at just COVID, but also covered swine flu, SARS, MERS, Ebola, and how people were impacted by the different pandemics. Their research looked at from 1985 to 2020, so before March 2020, before lockdown actually happened. Unfortunately, the quality of a lot of the studies were low to moderate, but they still could see that depression, like things I've been saying, depression, anxiety, loneliness, isolation were really coming as particular problems that young people were facing. And the other review that I thought particularly stood out was by Nearshow. In this article here, this was done until June 2020. So again, very early stages of the pandemic. This was specifically COVID specific, and again it demonstrates the impact that mental health and depression, anxiety was on the rise, and it showed how the different age groups within the young people were being affected. But again, the studies were not that great quality, low to moderate. So, a lot of further research needed to be done to substantiate what they're saying and also to find out the impact at a later stage. So the two areas that we were looking at was the impact and was coping. The reason that I'm looking at coping is because, as you can see, there was a significant impact, but how are actually people managing this on a day-to-day basis? How are our young people coping? So I was looking at the transactional model by Lazarus and Folkman, and this is looking at both sort of how they're thinking, their thought process, but also their behavioral responses, and how are they managing their internal stresses, which everybody was facing, as well as what they're hearing, and those were proceeding to exceed their personal resources. How were they able to cope? So the main areas of the transactional model is focusing on either problem solving, emotion focus. So the problem focused areas to be thinking about proactive ways of dealing with the stresses, talking to people who have got expertise in the area, maybe their parents, listening to the news, that kind of thing, or emotion focus, where they're having to sort of deal with their experiences through different ways of coping, through possibly avoiding distraction, exercise, gaming. So those are the things that were sort of focused on when we were looking at the research. And at the early stages, when we started this last year, and when I started doing the baseline sort of literature exploration, there was very little out there, and there wasn't much in terms of seminal pieces of research. there was a survey done, I think it was March 2020 by Young Minds, which is a leading charity in the UK, which did try and look at how young people were being supported with their mental health and what things were considered particularly helpful and what wasn't. And this is just a feedback of that. I think there was 2,111 young people that they assessed, well, not assessed, but these people gave feedback, and this is the results. As you can see, they were very reliant on face-to-face calls with friends, just different forms of distraction. The things that they found unhelpful was watching the news. I think initially people were very, very scared about what they were seeing and reading, and they needed ways of help to manage that. So that's what Young Minds found back then. We initially decided to do a systematic review because we wanted a really robust piece of research. However, because there was so much evidence coming out and so many articles that are being published, it felt that we need to be tackling this a bit quicker. So as a team, we discussed converting that from a systematic review to a rapid review, because we wanted to publish it at a time that it's not too late that we're leaving it. So any implications of this could be used for for policymakers or anybody who thinks that would be useful to explore it further. Also, when we made that decision earlier this year, India was facing a lot of problems with the pandemic, which I'm sure you're all aware of. So it felt that we need to be cautious about how much time we're able to allocate. So as a result, again, that was one of the reasons we chose a rapid review. And according to when I researched it, it says it can take around 6 months, a rapid review. Whether that's true, I think, it's debatable. But I think it's quite ambitious to do within 6 months, but a systematic review will take a lot longer, over 2 years, possibly. So we don't want this research to be going for too long, that there's too much more research coming our way. We want it to be quite succinct, so we want to do it in a shorter space of time, and that's why we opted for rapid reviews. So the methodology that we followed, we used the Cochrane guidelines to guide how we're going to structure our research, and we registered that with Prospero. Initially, like I said, we did decide to do systematic, then we converted to rapid review, and Prospero were quite fine with that. We have already done the abstract and title screening, and I'll show you the numbers in the slides further along. Then we're currently at the full text screening stage, so we're probably not as far as Tess and Kavita, but we're not too far behind. We still need to extract the data and synthesize, analyze it, and then conclude. And we're also thinking about what journals we like to publish in for the future, but we're just still keeping that in mind while we're doing the screening process. So the databases we used, Medline, Embase, CNAL, PsycInfo. We also used a couple of extra, Scopus and ASIA, which were ones that was recommended in the team because it focused more on the social side of things and the psychological articles. And we thought it'd give an interesting slant if not be included in the other databases. And for that reason, we included that in our search. So we transferred this to Raya, as you see with other studies, to be able to further the screening process. And now I'll hand it over to my colleague, Hashini.
Thank you, Ranjita. Just another thing that I would like to add is that we're looking at this review in two parts. One is the impact and the other is the coping part. The impact part of the review is focusing more on understanding the new onset or worsening of existing mental health disorders among children and adolescents, while Ranjita's part, the coping, is looking from more of a psychological framework. Next slide, please. For the impact part of the review, the eligibility criteria we're looking at is young people who are less than 18 years, developing or exacerbating mental health disorders. We are looking at a broader criteria, which includes both DSM and ICD criteria, not to miss out on any potential studies. The exposure is people living in the COVID pandemic. And the inclusion is only for empirical data papers which have been published in English language after January 2019. The primary outcome of the work would be on assessing the prevalence and the severity of new onset as well as exacerbation of pre-existing mental health conditions in young people less than 18 years of age, and also who have symptoms or subsyndromal symptoms as well. Next slide, please. This is the search strategy that we have used. This was driven by the initial review of literature and the aspects focused on different systematic reviews which were published earlier this year. Currently, we are going through the full text screening. We have used the Cochrane protocols for the rapid reviews. When we initially started with this review, then based on the initial keyword search, in Ryan, we had 8,159 independent total articles which were found. And after duplicates were removed, in Ryan, we had to remove all the duplicates manually. After removal of duplicates, we have found 5,003 unique entries, from where we have started with the title abstract screening. The initial 20% was screened by both of us, followed by an 80% screened by individual reviewers. From around 5,003 articles, 4,653 studies were excluded based on their outcome of interest, the population, as well as the study designs. The study designs for around 400 studies were based on perspective articles, background articles, and existing systematic reviews on the topic. Currently, we are at the stage of full text screening. We have 301 articles to screen against the eligibility criteria, which we are currently in the progress. We have uploaded all the full text articles to the Ryan database, and we are working on including and excluding them against the eligibility criteria. And following this, we'll be moving to the data extraction stage, and the quality assessment of each of these studies will be done against a strobe checklist for the observational studies. Next slide, please. Findings so far at this stage, it's quite preliminary, but we have been able to get some interesting findings, such as there is a significant increase in depression and anxiety disorders, and also post-traumatic stress symptoms as a direct impact of COVID in young people. There has been a significant increase in pediatric psychiatry emergency admissions and treatment seeking for self-harm and suicidal behaviors among this population. Mostly in UK, there is an increased hospitalization and service needs for adolescents with eating disorders. There is an increasing amount of behavioral problems and plateauing of developmental gains noted among children with neurodevelopmental disorders, such as ASD, and also among children who are seeking services for cerebral palsy. Worsening of pre-existing mental health conditions was noted to be due to disruption of ongoing services and lack of accessibility of services due to the pandemic measures. We are looking forward to assessing the findings in more detail as we go through the process. So over to you, Ranjita.
I'll go through where we are with the coping now. Okay, so our eligibility criteria was again using just empirical data, so just primary data, and that had to be in the English language. It had to be after January 2019, as when COVID really began. All the participants had to be, under the age of 18, it should read, and they had to be living in the COVID pandemic. And the main outcome was looking at how are they coping to manage their mental health. We were not just including those with diagnosis and mental health, but it's generally how young people have been managing their mental health using the different models out there, particularly focusing on the transactional theory and other sort of recent empirical data. So these are the search terms we decided upon based on the initial literature search that we did. We discussed this as a team and we submitted it to Ryan. And that's what we used. So these are the numbers of where we're at with the Prisma flow diagram. So initially we identified 7,014 articles. After removing the duplicates, that came down to 4,224. Once we screened these, there were a number of reasons why these were excluded. The population might have been, they're not correct, the outcome might not have been right, the study design, these were the main areas. Sometimes it was a combination of they were the wrong population, i.e. they could have been above 18, so we didn't use them in our group. The outcome was just not focusing on coping, and the study design was not empirical data. So they were the main reasons that we took them out. Now we're at the stage of screening for the full text articles, and we have 143 for coping. Also for the title and abstract, we used the same process as my colleague Hashini has mentioned. There was initially a pilot just using a small number of 45, I think we used in the end, blinded, and we both went through the same articles and then cross-checked whether we agreed to include them or not. And then we did once, and there was a very high sort of cross reliability. I think there was only 4 that we disagreed on, but then verbally we agreed on it. And then we did 20% of the rest of the number of the 424,224. And then we had a very small sort of number of conflicts, less than 10%. And again, we verbally agreed on which ones to include. And then I went through all the included rest of the articles, and my colleague Hashini went through all the excluded ones just to ensure that we were including all the relevant articles to be left with which ones we're going to look at for the full text articles. And that's where we're at the moment. And then following this, we'd be doing the data extraction and the qualitative synthesis. Similar to what Hashini was saying, we'll be using the Strobe bias assessment tool, and then putting together all the data. So it is very early in the stages of analysis. It's just really what we've seen while we've been scrolling through the articles is that I found that young people do tend to rely a lot on their social network during the pandemic. So even by contacting their friends through social media, etc., their parents, this can have both a positive and negative consequence because they might be using it too much, and then there's issues with screen time, but also it can be very sort of reassuring and helpful. Routine has been something that's come up very frequently, and personal strategies such as exercise, like I say, distraction, tapping into their interest, mindfulness. And then we're going to look into further if there are particular conditions where they've used specific coping strategies, and that's something we're going to be dissecting further along the line. And that's all from my side. If there's any questions from the group, I will stop sharing.
Thanks, Ranjita, and thanks, Hashini. That was a wonderful presentation and really nice to see some early themes in terms of the results coming through. In the interest of time, I don't see any questions in the chat. I think what we'll do is we'll move on and make it a slightly delayed start, but 9 minutes late to invite Paul Bokowitz, who's going to talk about I'm sorry, Paul, I decided to call this bizarre drug combinations, but actually you're quite right. This should have been fixed drug combinations. So I'm sure Paul will correct me on various aspects of this. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Adi. Apologies if I'm a bit muddled today because I am very tired and have not slept very much due to the jet lag. And as Adi was alluding, I didn't have much time to prepare the slides, but we'll carry on anyway. So what I'm going to talk about, as Adi said, is fixed dose drug combination psychotropic sales in India. For those who don't know me, I'm Paul Bogovich, an ST4, so early stages, higher trainee in child and adolescent psychiatry. There we go. So what I'm going to do is give you a bit of background to this topic area and give you an overview of the project that I'm going to be working on. We're at quite an early stage in the project. So at the moment, all I've got is the sort of protocol, a draft protocol to present, and then we'll have some time for discussion if there are any questions or comments. So first off, definition. So for people who aren't aware, fixed dose combination, or FDC, as I'll refer to it, is a pill or tablet, liquid, whatever, which includes 2 or more pharmacologically active ingredients, so 2 or more drugs. So the use of FDCs is well established for certain diseases, and the typical example that people would give is HIV infection. And there are definite advantages to using FDCs over the individual drugs in separate pills, tablets, etc. And that's really to improve concordance. So for example, in HIV, rather than taking a handful of tablets a day, you could take potentially just 1 a day. There are disadvantages though. The main one being that the polypharmacy, which is by definition part of an FDC, could result in more adverse effects. Then there are other issues such as potential problems with dose adjustment. So if the combination only comes in one sort of fixed strength, if you increase the dose of one of them, you then have to increase the dose of the other drug that's in the pill or tablet. There's limited evidence for the use of FDCs in psychiatry, and that comes from a systematic review which was published just a few years ago. The one exception to that is the combination of olanzapine and fluoxetine, which is used in bipolar depression. We know that psychotropic FDCs are widely available in India. So some previous research, which was published in 2015, actually found that of all antipsychotic sales, FDCs accounted for 1/3 in the 2011-2012 year. So since that paper was published, the government in India has been taking action to address the sales of medications like this. So they've set up a number of committees which have looked at whether these combinations are rational or not, and if not, whether either further evidence is needed or whether they should really be banned. The government's also attempted to ban some of these combinations with varying degrees of success. There's been some resistance from the pharmaceutical companies, including legal action to try and reverse the bans, and in some cases that's been successful. So just to give you an example of what I'm talking about. So this is a table from the 2015 paper, which happens to have been authored by people that I'm collaborating with at the moment. And this table presents the data for antipsychotic fixed dose combinations, FDCs, which were sold in 2011, 2012. And to draw your attention to the names of the drugs, I've put a little outline around that in a gold or yellow color. So you can see that some of these combinations are quite bizarre, as Adi said. The fourth one down, chlorpromazine, trifluoperazine, and trihexyphenidyl contains 2 antipsychotics in one tablet, and so on and so forth. And of course, you can see that olanzapine fluoxetine is in there, which we know has an evidence base and is used in countries such as the UK and the US. The other thing I just wanted to draw your attention to was the sales volume, which I've circled in pink there, the total at the bottom, which is 419 million tablets or capsules. So we're talking about quite large numbers of tablets and capsules for antipsychotics, and as we'll come on to, there are other FDC combinations apart from antipsychotics, such as with antidepressants. So I'm going to talk you through our draft protocol. So first of all, the team. So this research is being led by Professor Alison Pollock, who's a public health researcher at Newcastle University. We've got a number of colleagues based around the UK, in India, and Qatar. So in the UK, we have myself, Adi Sharma, and then we have Petra Sevchikova, who's a health economist, and she's based with or attached to the university here, though isn't based here. Peter Roderick, who's a lawyer and is attached to the university but is based down in London. Patricia McGettigan, who's a clinical pharmacologist, is also based in London. And then in India, we have Ashna Mehta, who's a public health researcher tied to the Public Health Foundation of India. And recently relocated to Qatar, we have Habib Hassan, who's another public health researcher, also with ties to the Public Health Foundation in India, as well as a university in Qatar. So in terms of the aims of the research, what we're looking to explore is the impact of the government's actions on sales of these FDCs. So we want to know whether in the last 6 years, the scene has changed, what's happening on the ground has changed, given that the government has been taking all these actions, as I referred to before. The other question that we have, particularly Adi and I, as people who work with children and young people, is whether any of these sales relate to kids. So if these combination drug products are being sold to parents for the use of for kids to use. In terms of the specific objectives, we want to do a literature review, which would look at any other research which might have been published in this area specific to India, but also research which research that looks at sales of these drugs, I meant, but also research that might consider why these drugs are being prescribed, whether from the perspective of the prescribers or pharmacists selling the medication, or from the perspective of the patients or parents, guardians, etc. The second objective that we have is to explore the sales trends, which will really address that issue of assessing the impact of government actions. That's to look at sales volumes and also the values of the sales. And then lastly, we would want to be comparing those trends against what the various government committees have recommended in terms of whether the drugs are rational, irrational, or further information is needed, whether those drugs have been banned by the government, and whether any of the drugs appear in the India essential medicines list, or the WHO essential medicines list. This, as I've kind of highlighted below the objectives, the scope of the research is still to be determined, in the sense that we haven't yet decided whether we will look at all psychotropic drugs, or if we'll replicate the scope of the 2015 paper. So that paper looked at FTCs which either contained an antipsychotic, an antidepressant, or a benzodiazepine / sedative. But having had some early access to the data, just to see what it's like, I've actually found quite a few FDCs which contain gabapentinoids, so pregabalin and gabapentin, which, although the combinations look as though they're being designed to treat neuropathic pain, they may of course be used on the ground for other indications. So that's something to be decided. In terms of the design of the research, we're going to be doing a retrospective study, and it's longitudinal, so we need to look at trends. The data that we're using is aggregate sales data from PharmaTrack, which is a commercial database that we have access to. And the previous information that we have on the database is that it has quite good coverage of a significant minority of states and territories within India. And that data can be used to extrapolate or determine figures for all India sales. It is aggregate data. It's not, there's no individual patient level data in there, and there's no kind of possibility of seeing what the sort of indication was for using the drugs. The other source of data that we'll use to determine, what the committee recommendations were, whether there were bans and the essential medicines lists, will be government and non-governmental publications. So sources that are in the public domain already. In terms of the data analysis, what we'll be doing is primarily exploratory. So looking at, what the trends have been like over the past few years, especially since the previous paper was published in 2015. We will probably go back to around 2008 and get as recent data as we possibly can. Ideally, 2021 data if possible. The other thing that we'll try to do, if possible, is an interrupted time series analysis. So that's a technique for analyzing longitudinal data, which can check whether a particular point in time, so for example, the date that the government issues a banning order for a particular fixed dose drug combination, whether that is a change point. So if the trend in the sales changes after that point, and you can factor in a sort of lag time, because of course it can take a while for those banning orders to be disseminated and for the change to come in. But that may be difficult because of some of the issues that I've already mentioned about how these pharmaceutical companies have contested the bans, and in some cases the bans have been overturned. In terms of other issues, like research governance, we won't need any major ethical approval for this work, because we're only using aggregate data. We're not doing any work with patients. There's no individual patient level data used. We don't have any specific funding for the work, but that is something that we would look into. And then in terms of our plans for dissemination, we'd certainly be looking to publish the work in academic journals, possibly the literature review separate from the main body of the work. And it may well be that the Public Health Foundation in India can help to disseminate this work within India. In terms of further work, as you might be wondering, and I'm certainly wondering, why all of this, why there's such high sales of these types of drugs. And, I think it's important that we don't make any assumptions about why the sales are so high, especially say for antipsychotics. So this work could lead on to some further work, such as qualitative studies, which could explore what the reasons are for prescribing or consuming these types of combinations. So that's all I really had to say, and I've just put a couple of those references on the screen there, the meta-analysis of these types of drugs in psychiatry and the previous work by Alison and her team. So I'll just stop screen sharing so that I can see the question.
Thanks, Paul. Fantastic whistle stop tour. Sorry, guys, we're running a little bit late, but thank you, Paul, for also condensing and sticking to your time, even though you started really late. I don't see any questions on the chat, but just, opportunity for you to comment. I mean, when this project came up, and I can certainly remember practicing psychiatry in India, it was worrying for me to see that not much has changed in the 20 years since I left. So that is a worrying trend. However, as Paul's pointed out, I think our real interest is to allow Paul to develop his career. Paul has a really keen interest in not just child and adolescent psychiatry, but also sort of child and adolescent psychiatry, combining with public health and policy. So this is an ideal project for him to hopefully think about applying for a funded fellowship, which would do this mixed methods approach, and that will involve hopefully psychiatrists within India to find out, what are the factors that maintain the high levels of sales, and indeed some interviews with patients. We should be under no illusion. And I think it's really interesting. The public health guys who've been doing this work to date are coming at this very much from a public health, legal aspect, all very important work. But, they're forgetting the human component, the psychological reasons why this might be happening. So I still see no questions or hands up. So I just wanted to say a huge thanks, Paul, for presenting at short notice. Really interesting project. Hopefully we'll invite you to provide us an update at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks. We're running a little bit late. I propose that we take a break and come back at 11:20. I know that Richard's already messaged me to say, unfortunately, he'll have to leave at 11:45. But we'll come back to a discussion led by, or rather an update led by Stella, and perhaps Richard, you could just contribute initially on all of the exciting developments to do with older people's research that's been going on. So huge thanks, Stella and Richard. We'll be back with you in 10 minutes. Thanks, guys. See you in a bit. Thanks, Stella and Richard. It's 11:20, so a little bit later than planned. We'll hand the floor to you to speak on behalf of the Mental Health for Older Adults group.
Okay. I'm just checking, can everyone see the screen and us?
Yeah, I can see you, Stella.
Can you see the screen though?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, should have clarified. You did ask the question and I responded ambiguously.
Okay. All right, well, it's really nice to be here and see so many familiar people. For those that don't know me, I'm Stella, old age psychiatrist based up in Gateshead. And I guess we're going to give a research update on the older person strand. And I guess this is very much a discussion of the trials and tribulations of trying to keep a collaboration going during COVID-19. So a couple of years ago now, I can't seem to forward the slides. Does anybody know how you forward the slides?
You might just need to click away from the box that has all of us, all of our images in it, and then if you click on the screen, then you might be able to then click right. Yeah. Oh.
I might have to do it like this. Should I try again from the beginning? Yeah, okay. Clicking away helped. Thank you. So a couple of years ago now, when we all met in Dhaka, we had just been given some funding from the British Council. It's a small grant from the South Asia Fund looking at capacity building between the UK, India and Nepal on older people's mental health. So this was a small pilot project very much looking at addressing some of the research gaps with a view to building future larger collaborations. So the rationale for this, as I'm sure lots of people are aware, is that the majority of older people worldwide live in low and middle income countries. We know that the mental health needs of older people differ from younger adults, but we also know the vast majority of research that's been done in ageing and in older people's mental health originates in high income countries where people's needs differ. We know that there's a very large mental health gap, particularly in low middle income countries, between needs and healthcare resources, but that mental health gap isn't actually very well characterised for older people. And the graph on the screen shows that the areas which are more highly coloured are the areas where that gap is known to be most acute, which includes quite a lot of South Asia. And based on our initial discussions at the previous NEESAMA meetings with people qualified and working in older people's mental health, it was clear that the knowledge base is based on some high-profile studies in India in particular, which have led to influential reports and policy-level changes, but that most studies originate in India and are focused on dementia. We know that the prevalence of dementia is likely to double in the next 20 years in East and South Asia, and that the cost is very high, estimated $185 billion per year, which is largely borne by family members. So this is an acute problem. But the gap is that this hasn't really been looked at in other South Asian countries anywhere near to the same extent, and other mental disorders, as far as we were aware, haven't really been very well studied. So one of the implications of the lack of data is that mental health screening tools applicable to older people in South Asia are lacking. So a lot of clinicians were having to use tools from high-income countries and felt they had very little guidance in what they should use to assess their patients. And it was generally agreed that the lack of local prevalence estimates for mental disorders means that it's very difficult to get any funding. So local policymakers would be less likely to allocate funding if they were not able, if there was no data on the scale of the problem. So in particular, in Nepal, which is the basis of our capacity building collaboration at the time that we put this application together, there were no community-based prevalence studies of common mental disorders in Nepal and no national dementia plan. So this is part of the Alzheimer's Disease International report data. So what we proposed to do was that myself and Amu Lukos, who is a psychologist who was linked to NIMHANS at the time, would, as early career researchers, be mentored by more senior researchers to conduct this collaboration, and through that to mentor Preksha Thapa, who is one of the few MSc qualified nurses in psychiatry in Nepal, to carry out an epidemiological study with our help where needed. We felt Newcastle had a lot of previous experience in epidemiology in Tanzania in particular, and of course NIMHANS are very experienced in epidemiology in India, whereas the institute in Nepal, BP Koraila, although they had not conducted a large amount of research, they were well resourced with the only geriatric psychiatrist currently employed, and as I mentioned, one of the few MSc qualified psychiatric nurses in Nepal. So what we proposed to do was to start with a systematic review of screening tools for use in common mental disorders in South Asia, to conduct a survey of health and social care resources by country, formalising the discussions on the healthcare gap, which we had already had informally, and then to conduct a pilot prevalence survey in one ward of Dharan submetropolitan city in Nepal, looking at the prevalence of common mental disorders in older people. So that just shows you that our original plan was to conduct the prevalence survey door to door in Ward 18, being the nearest ward to the hospital. We have since changed that plan. So our original plan pre-COVID had been that this would be a door-to-door community prevalence survey where, using the census data, we tried to screen everybody aged 60 and over using the census data held at the ward office in each household within that particular ward. The screening would be done face-to-face by an MSc qualified psychiatric nurse using the tools we had identified in our previous systematic review, and then confirmatory diagnosis of anybody who was screen positive, and to increase the rigour, 10% of screen negative cases, and this would be done by psychiatric trainees supervised by Professor Sapkota. We also planned, based on some pilot work that we had done on patient public involvement, because this is something that is we felt was currently lacking in low middle income countries and in South Asia. We would do some patient public involvement work with community stakeholders looking at future research priorities, again to inform future research grants. So I'll give an outline of our current progress and challenges as of now. So we have managed to publish our review, systematic scoping review of screening tools for common mental disorders. This was published earlier on this year, and the work was led by Lachlan Fotheringham, who is currently a teaching fellow. He's an SPR hoping to do old age psychiatry. And essentially what we decided to do was, because we knew that there was limited data, we decided to scope the available common mental disorder screening tools and summarise their use in epidemiology and the extent to which they've been validated or adapted in South Asia. We used the PRISMA guidelines, and where we found validation studies, we assessed them with the QuadAS2 tool. And essentially what we found was very similar to our initial discussions. So the majority of studies had taken place in India. The majority had assessed only depression, and the majority had used just one tool developed in high-income countries, the geriatric depression scale. And whilst this had been generally translated, it hadn't always been adapted. So of 176 articles identified of diagnostic or screening tool use that were applicable to our study, we found only 15 validation studies that we were able to critically appraise, of which 10 were usable as diagnostic tests after quality assessment. They all assessed for depression, and like I mentioned, it was mostly the geriatric depression scale. The diagnostic accuracy was really variable across different settings. There were lots of methodological issues using the QuadAS2 scale. And what we found was that in epidemiological studies, most assessed only depression, but most assessed most used high-income country tools and didn't always indicate how they'd adapted them or considered that. We also carried out our survey of health and socioeconomic resource provision, looking at Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. And this was a survey of general healthcare resource provision, so pensions, healthcare resource spending, number of geriatric psychiatrists, etc. Now, this is not published in a peer-reviewed journal. We have submitted this twice and we haven't managed to get it accepted yet. So this is a work in progress, but it is available online. The main issues with it is quite a long paper, so we're quite limited as to where we can submit it that will take something of this length and also doesn't charge any fees. So we're still working on this. But what we did find was that the healthcare spending per country is quite variable within the NEESAMA remit in terms of government spending, but that out-of-pocket costs per person are quite high compared to, for example, insurance or pension. So if older people do need healthcare, then it's very likely that they're going to have to pay a substantial out-of-pocket cost. We found that in most countries, older persons' healthcare is provided by generalists, so primary care doctors, general physicians, nurses, community healthcare workers in rural areas. The numbers are low, as we expected. There's minimal postgraduate opportunities for geriatric medicine or old age psychiatry training, and the current number of specialist sort of geriatricians or old age psychiatrists is low. As I mentioned before, the majority of healthcare costs are covered by out-of-pocket payments, and financial provision for people with dementia was only available. But it's available in India and Nepal, but this was something that we weren't previously aware of. But in Nepal, you can get a government benefit for getting a diagnosis of dementia to help with your care. So it was quite useful to know that. So the main challenge that we've had is the epidemiological survey. This was delayed substantially due to the COVID-19 pandemic, partly due to safety. Now, this is safety of the participants and also the staff. Nepal was really badly hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, as I'm sure everyone is aware. We didn't feel it was safe at all to even attempt to carry out a face-to-face survey. and especially ethically, just thinking about having a health assessment that was not essential. And also key members of the team were redeployed. So Preksha Thapa, who was going to be our lead researcher, spent a lot of time being redeployed running women's health services and taking other nursing leadership roles. And also Professor Sapkota was given other duties. So that was quite challenging. We initially decided to wait and see whether we would be able to run the study as is a bit later on. And we were also quite challenged by even the pandemic in the UK. So obviously everybody was working from home. It was very hard to get responses from, we had to coordinate with the British Council and with the university and with the people in Nepal. And this all took probably a lot longer than it would pre-pandemic. So we had to be patient. We did publish an article in the Old Age Psychiatrist talking about the challenges and how maybe there were some opportunities from learning from telehealth and just thinking about how to keep a collaboration going in those circumstances. So I'm really grateful that everybody remained involved and remained hopeful despite these challenges. So eventually we, after a series of meetings, decided that we were in danger of not being able to do the study at all. It was unlikely, given the pace of the vaccine rollout in Nepal, that we would be able to run a face-to-face survey. So rather than not do the work, with our basic goal being to give a prevalence estimate to the local policymakers, we decided to redesign the study as a telephone survey. We had a series of meetings deciding on tools and had to carry out some further literature review to look at which tools have been validated by use of telephone and what we thought would be suitable. And we also relied quite heavily on the clinical experience of Professor Varghese in India and obviously Professor Sapkota in Nepal on which tools were at least well translated and well used. So we redesigned the study to include 2 wards. We'd originally felt 1 ward was within our sample size calculation for a prevalence estimate, but we wanted to look at risk factors. And we selected tools to look at depression, anxiety, dementia, and disability in these 2 wards. So we selected measures for dementia, including the IQ code and this brief community screening instrument for dementia. And for anxiety, we chose the GAD-7, the geriatric depression scale, because there was a translated version in Nepal that the team felt was usable, the EASY scale, which is designed in India for functional disability, and the Bartel index, as well as demographic and risk factors. So instead of doing a formal 2-stage survey where we look at screen negative controls, the first stage will carry out the screening tools, 3 items with the patient if they consent, so the CSID, the GDS and the GAD-7, and then 3 scales with the relative or carer. Our conclusion ethically was that it was important to get a dementia diagnosis because of the likely benefits, and also we needed to offer treatment to anyone found to have a severe mental illness. So 2nd stage assessment is only of those people who are positive on screening and will be done by video or phone call with Professor Sapkota where at all possible, with inpatient assessment only when strictly necessary. This, we agreed, would be sufficient for them to have an official referral letter in most cases for them to be able to get their state benefits and access to healthcare. and anyone with likely very severe depression or who might need to be seen in hospital would be referred. So we're quite lucky that we've got a MSc qualified psychiatric nurse doing the initial screening. So she'll be able to get additional information where necessary. And I guess we have learned from our work last year in Tanzania, having to run epidemiological studies remotely. So we've now got experience on collecting data on tablets that you can view and share online using an open source epidemiological software called ODK Collect and the Kobo Toolbox. So what the team will be able to do in Nepal is to collect the data. We'll be able to see it in real time and help with any inconsistencies or problems if they occur. And this has also been discussed with the university data management system team who think this is appropriate. So in terms of current status, we now, as of I think last week, have ethical clearance in Nepal for the revised protocol, so we can start. We've got a collaboration agreement in place, and we've submitted a risk assessment to the British Council based on our revised plan, and we're ready to start. We have quite a tight deadline, so I don't think we can get an extension past the end of December, so we have to start now and we have to finish by the end of December, because I don't think we'll get any more extensions after that, although the British Council have been very understanding up until now. So that's where we are. So hopefully we'll manage it. I'm quite hopeful we will. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Stella, and thanks, Richard. And the team, including Nadesh, Matthew. Over to the delegates for any questions. I don't notice any on the chat, but you've, I have to say, valiantly carried on despite all the difficulties.
No, I'm very grateful to the team in Nepal for sticking with it. I think we all had times where we thought we might not be able to, but they've attended lots of meetings over very bad connections, and we've come up with a plan. So yeah. I think we can start.
And it sounds like a fairly well thought out, considered plan to try and keep the elderly who are particularly vulnerable to COVID and other issues safe. Yeah. Any questions or comments from anyone? Jackie, yeah, go for it.
It's not a question, it's just a comment, and it's just, to say what an amazing example of how to keep going in the face of adversity and all of the challenges that I think, we can learn from and be inspired by. So it's incredible, and I really hope you manage to get it done in the time that remains.
Yeah, the race is on, but we're going to have
to. Have everything crossed for you.
So I was just going to say, absolutely amazing. Stella has kept driving this all the way through. And it's been a lot of work for her to keep things going. But the guys out there have been absolutely brilliant, particularly Prekshia. All these problems get thrown at her, and she comes up with solutions around it. So, yeah, fingers crossed we can sprint the last 100 yards, as it were, very fast. But it was just actually, just to comment on the paper that we were involved with, that Stella mentioned in her presentation. It would be really grateful to have ideas about where people think we can send that paper. I'm very reluctant to cut it down very much because it's got a lot of really, really useful information. But the longer we wait, the less published it will be, and we'll have to go back and start looking at the literature again. It was rejected by Global Health Research and Policy. But if people have ideas about journals, maybe in Asia, that would be suitable, that would be keen to take an article such as this, please let me know, and then we can try and turn the paper around and try and get it resubmitted. And I guess one thought was actually, and Stella mentioned this, is I guess that we might be able to find some funds for if we have to pay a fee. I'm looking at Adi here, but he can't see me looking at him. Possibly.
I can, Richard, and fingers crossed, we should be hearing soon whether we have any funds in the global challenges and other funding streams. You know, well, the situation waxes and wanes, but we should hear soon. If there are any funds available, we will get back. The other source of funding that you could consider applying to is the Mental Health Foundation Northeast branch, and I can send you details offline. That's the charity we applied to for the small grant for Tess and Kavita's combined work.
Yeah, okay, well, that would be really helpful. But again, I mean, brilliant. If anyone can send me ideas of journals that they think might be suitable. I'm thinking Matthew Shaker, you know, journals that might be an Indian journal that might be appropriate for this or whatever. It's, you know, a lot of work's got into it and there's, by everyone, and it's some really interesting data. It would be nice to see it in the public domain, really. And then the only other thing I was going to say was I'm going to have to apologise because I have to go because I'm doing a Q&A session on a Parkinson's conference this morning, which I need to go out of this one and join that one. But great, brilliant to see everyone again, and thanks to the organising team for putting it together. But just a final thought on the talk just before the break. I'd be interested to see how much drug-induced Parkinsonism there is now in India with all those combination antipsychotic medications, because I spend a lot of my time in the UK telling the juniors not to prescribe these medications to people because we'll end up seeing them in the Parkinson's clinic. So that might be an interesting study for the future, I think.
Absolutely, Richard. One that we will signpost Alison and the team to, and I'm sure Paul would be intrigued. I mean, I think it's just bizarre to have, you know, two really toxic antipsychotics with all sorts of you know, problems being packaged and still sold together. But we don't know why, and this might measure the burden, as it were, but it doesn't tell us why it's still happening. And that's something, this is a wider program of work. So we'll certainly come back to you. It sounds like you're interested.
And just another thought, because we've just done a bit of work about antihypertensives, and actually there's a strong argument why you should give antihypertensives in combination, because it actually improves compliance. And there's been sort of big studies worldwide in low middle income countries looking at this to address the issue of hypertension. So there's a strong argument actually for using combinations to improve compliance. Yeah.
And I suspect, Richard, that is certainly anecdotally from my, sorry, Stella, I just wondered if you could stop screen sharing, just then we can see more of I suspect that it's a lot to do with the number of tablets as well. There is this sort of, you know, if you're taking too many tablets, is that because you're very unwell and patients feel like that? And if you give them one combined tablet, then it doesn't seem as bad. Of course, in terms of adherence, you know, does it improve that? But I think these are questions that are unanswered. And I think at that stage, you know, Paul, myself, and the wider team would really want to get input from our experts in India, because I think we might run the risk of appearing somewhat paternalistic, which is what we absolutely want to avoid. So I think we're going to, you know, come back to colleagues at NIMHANS, AIMS, and other, you know, established networks. But thank you. Matthew, did you want to come in? I see your camera's on, and it's nice to see you.
Sorry, I'm just going to have to say bye-bye now because I need to go to this other meeting, but cheers, guys.
Very briefly, I just want to echo what Richard said about how we've been struggling to get this, you know, project underway, and I really laud Stella's efforts in this. She keeps goading us along, and it's now, and I think the British Council has been very helpful in sense of letting us stretch this out through the COVID.
And I think we have finally arrived at all the hurdles, and then we should be able to get it done, I think, in Nepal. Just to add to what the earlier paper and comments from Richard, I'll be happy to send Paul a couple of papers on this. We had a couple of papers, one on anticholinergic burden and another one on, I think we did an audit of medicines. We just have another one coming for dementia medicine. So I'm happy to send something to Paul if he wants. I'll find some and send it. But remember that a lot of combinations are used not by psychiatrists, they're used by other doctors, like physicians. I suspect that many psychiatrists have stopped using combinations now. There'll be some in the private sector which do, but a lot of it is used by physicians, and in very small doses. For example, the one that you saw, the flupentixol and I think melitrazone, I think, is actually used for anxiety by general physicians. The antipsychotic dosage is very, very low, and it's combined with an antihistaminic, which gives some sedation. So it's actually used for sleep and anxiety. Absolutely the wrong things to use it for. But Lundbeck, that's made by the Lundbeck company, by the way. They've been promoting it for a long time. So I can give you a lot of insights about it because,
that would be really helpful. Thank you. I've just put my email address in the chat.
Yeah, but my email is on the thing, so you can just write to me, or Adi or somebody can give it. It's on the NEESAMA.
Paul, I'll send you Matthew's details.
Sure. Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah. And thanks, it's really interesting. Thanks, Gunjan, for bringing it up. We had wondered, coming back to Paul's project very briefly, because Gunjan's just put something on to say that in Nepal they don't have too many fixed drug combinations, which I think is at one level extremely reassuring. But on the other level, without knowing why they still exist in India or why they're being, why the sale is still so high, I think we need to be cautious in sort of, because we don't know what the causal factors are. Matthew's alluded to some of them already, and thanks for pointing that out, Matthew. But we just to reassure the other NEESAMA countries, we had asked Paul and I whether the team that is led by Professor Pollack wanted to expand the links to consider Bangladesh and Sri Lanka and Pakistan. We got a very helpful response. They didn't say no, but what they said was that the regulatory mechanisms, as one would imagine, are so different in each country. And Sheikh has just put on the chat that in Bangladesh it's more robust, and perhaps it is in Nepal as well. So the team's been doing this work with partners in India for the last nearly 20 years. So they've got a wealth of information about the Gogate report and the various other reports that I think Paul is very familiar with from an Indian context. So they thought that it might make more sense to build on existing work and then see if there is a need to expand that to the wider South Asian network. And indeed, we had mentioned to them, I know Richard's left, but Stella's still here, thinking about possible links with East Africa. And we had wanted to expand our global mental health remit to start including, build on Richard and Stella's links with Tanzania, for example. And of course, COVID struck. But, the world will eventually reopen and we will be able to visit and restart. I'm also hoping that we'll be able to get a small pot of money for when it is safe for Paul to visit India, perhaps visit the All India Institute and NIMHANS. And Matthew, then it'll be really helpful for Paul to get a sense of what's happening in really good academic centers, maybe speak to some of the psychiatrists and get a feel of what's happening, what you've alluded to as well. Because I think that's really important for Paul to do. He's keen to do it. He's not been to South Asia yet, so it'll be baptism by fire, but I'm absolutely certain Paul's up to the challenge. Paul,
I'm happy to work with. I'm happy to work with you, Paul. So because I have a lot of insights, having been in the field for almost 40 years now. Just another quick comment, Adi, if I may. Since I've realized that you and Shekhar have brought in a couple of your students, actually one of my students is there, and Stella has met her actually. Sai Sudha, her name is, and she's working in geriatric old age psychiatry, I believe. Is that right, Stella? And she was with us last year. And
yes, she's around, and she's very active actually. She presented during her annual leave from India a very interesting case discussion to our regional conference last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. So I was just wondering, just like you've got Tess and other people from child psychiatry, you could get, if possible, you could get her to come and I don't know if she's free to come tomorrow, but you could invite her if possible. And I'm sure she can join.
Yeah, NEESAMA is not a closed group, Matthew. First of all, thank you for pointing that out. Sorry, I know we're in the Northeast, and you would think that we are, there's more sheep than humans in the Northeast, but we still don't see each other very much. Stella and I don't work very far from each other. We're just across the river, as it were. But because of COVID, we're not seeing each other. So I wondered, Stella, if you've got her email, feel free to forward the link for tomorrow, just so she's got a sense of what's going on. And I'll also perhaps ask her whether she'd like to be included in the general NEESAMA circulation list.
I'll ask her. It may be, if she's working clinically, that tomorrow is a bit short notice, because if she's got clinic, I don't know, it might be a bit late. But I certainly do have her email, and I could ask her.
Yeah, and if she's interested, Stella, in signing, sort of being told what's happening in NEESAMA, as now Ranjita is getting those emails, and others, and Paul, then she can pick and choose what she'd like to attend. That this is a dynamic movement, and as I think Shekhar would always say, it's about that injection of new blood. We need new, vibrant, early clinicians and researchers and sort of teachers to take the alliance forward. Yeah,
it is true. We'll have to have a think, Matthew.
Yeah.
Think who we can find. So, and Adi, if you know of any sort of academic psychiatry trainees who are interested in older people, then do.
I will certainly keep you posted. You know that Ellie and I tried our utmost to persuade Lachlan to do child psychiatry, but we couldn't.
Oh, but it's okay. He's doing old age, and he's actually helping me with the HIV studies. So I'm very grateful. And I'm sorry he's not doing child, but
I know,
but we did. He's helped me out a lot.
Yeah. We will certainly, keep posted and keep the dialogues open. So huge thanks to Matthew for telling us about the trainee. And also, I suppose, just to say that Shekhar has just reminded us that Matthew too retired just earlier this year from NIMHANS.
Just in July. Just in July, actually. And I'm now at St. John's Medical College as an adjunct professor. Shekhar's retiring next month, I believe.
Yes, not long to go. And thank you, Shekhar, for pointing that out. And what I have to just say is that whilst we talk about an injection of new blood, we still need the experience of Matthew and Shekhar and indeed others like yourself. And, I just wanted to also say, unfortunately, Naila can't be with us today because she's running a fever. It's not COVID, Fazana has told us. But, we need that expertise and the wisdom to guide us along as well. So it's that lovely balance between, the experience and the passion and enthusiasm that youth brings, which, Paul, Ranjita, Mitali, Gunjan, and all other early career researchers led by Ran. I mean, Ran's been fantastic. What I propose is that we are now running a little bit late, but I'm pleased to say we just have the Cope with COVID presentation to go through. Shouldn't take too long to do that. I propose we take another 10-minute break, and come back for 12:10. In the meantime, guys, I have tried to put together a collage of some photographs from Bangladesh. Some very polite and some more fun and frivolous. So I'll try and get the screen slideshow to go, but feel free while you're getting tea, coffee, to just have a look at that and have a chuckle. Yeah. Okay. See you in a bit.
Get out. Happy birthday to you.
So I know this you've been all watching it because you've been seeing it, you've been typing stuff on the chat. I think it was fab that we got to celebrate Kedar's birthday while in Dhaka, and what fond memories. I must admit, I struggled to find no, I was struggling to actually remove photographs because there's just all very fun things. I'll try and convert it into a film that I can maybe send you all a link to watch at in due course, if possible. And Mitali, I'm sure a time will come when we can all meet again. It has to, but yeah, it has to come at a time when we're all safe. Right. So thank you all very, very much for being for being here today. And we just like to present the Cope with COVID project and just share with you. I think a lot of you are actively involved in this project. And so I present this on behalf of the wider Cope with COVID team, which includes collaborators from Newcastle University, the Capital University of Science and Technology at Pakistan, Goa Institute of Management, of course, NIMHANS and Kanti Children's Hospital, BRAC University in Bangladesh, the Open University of Sri Lanka, and of course, CNTW NHS Foundation Trust. What we're just going to cover very briefly, and I will skip through the Global Challenges Academy for Mental Health and NEESAMA because you guys are aware of those, but talk a little bit about pandemics and mental health, which will resonate a lot with Ranjita's presentation and Harshini's. Talk about, the fact how we got to collaborate with the Goa Institute of Management and our published study on the first week of lockdown in India, and then the Cope with COVID project, including next steps. So some of you may know the university here at Newcastle is very interested in global challenges, and there are a variety of global challenges academies that were set up through funds that the UK government was releasing. It is these funds that are still in question. Partly these funds funded us to allow us to develop and sustain NEESAMA to date. Because of the COVID pandemic and because of the financial pressures on all government, this funding the ODA budgets have been cut. There is a lot of opposition to this, but we're not certain how much funding we will be able to get. As you all know, I don't need to tell you, this is a collaboration between our partners across Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Nepal. I also wanted to say that we had invited some of our partners from Afghanistan, including our early career researcher, Dr. Hakimullah Salah, who got in touch with me and said he will be there and he will be joining us. But we all know the situation in Afghanistan is not fantastic at the moment, so our thoughts are with them. Those are just some lovely photographs of our two events, that one being in the amazing Kathmandu and the ever so gracious and warm Dhaka hospitality from 2019. So psychological distress is not new in epidemics. What is new, of course, is, as these papers will cite, is the fact that, we have had a global pandemic since the Spanish flu in 100 years. So this is something that is unprecedented. And while the first few studies that really talked about this is this study from colleagues in Italy, where nearly a third of the adults were reporting severe psychological impact on a scale called the Impact of Events Scale Revised, which is a proxy PTSD measure. And these scores were lower in healthcare workers than in non-healthcare workers. However, healthcare workers directly involved in COVID-19 care, I suspect intensive care, etc., or paramedics had higher scores, and nearly a third of children were at high risk for PTSD. What we do know is that higher psychological impact occurs mainly in women, somewhat, well, probably not surprisingly, but in younger people, being a student and being single or separated. There is lower impact when participants live with children or are staying with 6 or more people and being employed. And as you can see, this was a large study of 7 middle-income countries in Asia, and these are the impact of event scale here, the scores, and Thailand was particularly affected here. So I'll move on to our work. If any of you would like to get in touch with me, I'm happy to send you a PDF of these slides. What I just want to highlight here is on coping, because there's a lot of emphasis on impact and maybe not so much on how people are coping with this impact. So research has shown that there's use of maladaptive coping strategies which can predict burnout as well. And effective coping with COVID-19 was associated with lower levels of stress and better general health, thus highlighting the importance of effective coping. And that is really important. It doesn't, it sounds perfectly reasonable, but it's important to have the evidence to back it up. Previous studies have also found that the coping strategies associated with better mental health were positive reframing, social support, the use of humor, and mindfulness-based coping. The avoidance, the use of social media and behavioral disengagement were associated with higher levels of stress, anxiety, and psychological impact. And this has been shown in quite a few studies. However, what the gap when we were looking at all this was there's limited research looking at the global psychological impact of COVID-19, a lack of prospective longitudinal data, coping behaviors on a global scale, and limited research into the impact of morbidity and mortality figures, and therefore its impact on psychological impact and coping. So we came across, or rather Jackie very helpfully came across our colleagues here, Divya Singhal and Paddy, who are both, they're actually husband and wife at the Goa Institute of Management, who unfortunately got separated during the first week of the lockdown in India. Paddy had gone to visit his family in Tamil Nadu, and unfortunately because of the lockdown, he got stuck there. And Divya was in Goa, and they developed this study pretty much on their own. And what they really did was to use Qualtrics to collect data during this first week of lockdown in India, with the link to Qualtrics shared through social media, particularly WhatsApp and Facebook. Their study took just 10 minutes. And the participants were not permitted to skip any of the items, but of course they could not, choose not to continue with the study. And these are the measures. So unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, they used the health anxiety, they developed a health anxiety scale, which is adapted from the short health anxiety inventory. They developed the coping mechanisms, which was adapted from coping checklist, and that's the reference there. And they use the ROTA internal, external locus of control to measure locus of control. Now, these measures, the first 2 measures are not validated yet. So please bear that in mind. But, they did do a rigorous work developing it. So we had fantastic colleagues from the maths department at Newcastle, and a huge thanks goes to Steve Humble and Pauline Dixon for this analysis plan, which was a hybrid model with both structural and measurement components, analyzed relationship between locus of control, coping mechanisms, and health anxiety. And a structured equation model was then carried out to establish the construct validity of the data. So they had, in that first week, 234 participants, with more male than female participants, which is an interesting finding. Invariably, most surveys are, or most of these research surveys are reporting more female participants. Unfortunately, they were categorized into these 3 age groups, and we don't have access to the raw data there. And 60% were from non-metro cities, and 47% were employed, and you can see that breakdown. And 89% were living with their families during the lockdown period, which is unsurprising given how India still largely, despite being a transitional society, still has sort of families living together. So this was an explanatory factor analysis on coping items, and you can see it sort of behaved reasonably okay. We divide that into behavioral coping, mindful coping, and coping through social media, and those are the items there. Now, in the 18 to 31 category, what it really showed was the model weighted towards an internal locus of control. It also weighed towards, they used a lot of coping via social media and to an extent behavioral coping, but not mindful coping. In the 32 to 45, they coped equally towards internal and external locus of control, and nearly balanced for mindful coping and coping through social media, but not so much of behavioral coping. And lastly, in the 46 and older, it weighted largely towards an external locus of control, with the model weighted nearly equally between behavioral and mindful, but not through social media. And then when we did a linear regression analysis, what it showed us was that the younger age was predictive of greater health anxiety associated with COVID-19, and coping through social media also significantly predicted health anxiety in response to COVID-19. Finally, external locus of control also significantly predicted health anxiety. So our findings really showed us that there was the locus of control as predictor of anxiety were in keeping with previous literature, and I've cited some of the literature. There's a lot more here. The internal locus of control may increase until middle age and then decrease, perhaps, although this is, not definitively there. Health-related anxiety was highest in the 18 to 31 years age group, consistent with previous reports. In fact, most reports are predicting that it's the 18 to 25 category that is driving this the most. One explanation for this might be that when facing a problem, younger adults are more likely to react to it with active emotions such as anxiety or fear that motivate them to solve the problem than do older adults. The increased use of social media could be viewed as an avoidant coping mechanism. It could also be that this coping strategy allowed these individuals to seek out social and emotional support to alleviate anxiety. However, any gains would be in the short term, because the feeling of relaxation would then end once social media use was finished. Social media on the whole, or the use of it, might not be the best way forward. Behavioral and mindfulness coping may help alleviate anxiety through a process akin to acceptance and active engagement, such as acceptance and commitment therapy or mindfulness as well for health anxiety. And higher levels of mindfulness may result in internal experiences to be perceived as less threatening, thereby allowing one to tolerate uncertainty and decrease with the need to engage in safety behaviors like information seeking that perpetuate and maintain health anxiety. So there are obviously a lot of limitations to this project, but this was a very interesting study that we've been able to publish. This really helped us refine our work for the Cope with COVID project, which what we wanted to do was assess the psychological impact of COVID-19 on the general population globally, using, as I said, the impact of event scale and coping mechanisms using the brief COPE. Now, these two measures have been almost used to death in various studies, so they're very good measures. Unfortunately, what we've not incorporated are measures of anxiety. The impact of event scale very much is a PTSD measure, whereas thinking about the depression, anxiety, stress scale, or the DAS-21, which other projects have used, is not something that we used, but we did have to balance out the length of the project, and our in-country experts, did we all agreed that we didn't want to make it too long. We had funding from the university's Global Mental Health Challenges Academy network, and we got ethical approval from the university to do this. Data was collected again using the Qualtrics platform, using NEESAMA. Thanks to all of you for spreading the message to the university's Global Challenges Network and various social media platforms. We collected demographic data on age, gender, country of residence, and occupation. Actually, from Qualtrics collects and participants knew this. It collects the lat-long data based on where you're responding from. So we've got fairly precise data on where people were when responding. So in terms of, we were collecting data at different time points. We collected from the 21st of May 2020 to 21st July 2020, which was time point 1 data collection. And we got the demographics, the impact of events scale, their email address, so we could contact them at time points 2 and 3, and the brief scope scale. They were then contacted and have been contacted via email to actually give us data at time point 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we've got 4 follow-on points as well. They were also asked at time point 1 if they would consent to a qualitative interview, which lasted about 30 to 45 minutes. And we collectively, as a group between the co-investigators, produced the questions on which to ask. Measures, we use the impact of events scale, and that is the scale as you can see it. And that's why it's continued. It's 22 items. And as you can see here, there are 3 subdivisions: intrusion, avoidance, and hyperarousal. So very much that PTSD feel to it. The revised impact of events scale, which is 22 questions, and it scores here. So you see 24, below 24 is largely okay. But 24 or more, it's of concern. 33 and more is suggestive of a probable diagnosis, and 37 is considered extremely high. The brief scope is a 28-item measure, and each scores between 1 and 4. And I've listed the questions out for you all to have a quick look at. And there we go. That's the next bit. I'll let you have a quick skim. And just to let you all know, we did do the survey in the English language, which is a limitation, but it wasn't, there was a lot of discussion because some of these measures were available in some of the languages for South Asia, but not all languages. So I think on balance, we felt they would probably be good to limit it to just the use in the English language. Would welcome your thoughts on that. We use the John Hopkins website, and there's the link, to collect data on morbidity and mortality due to COVID-19, as reported on the John Hopkins website, on the date that the respondent completed the questionnaire. We had over 1,608 participants take part in the study. They started the study, but only 908 of them completed all the measures. Of these, 17 participants completed the qualitative interview. The mean age of participants was 38.62 years, and more females completed the questionnaire, 60.1%, which is sort of similar to most COVID-related research. The age varied from 18 to 74, for females, and for males, it was 19 to 81. So fairly similar, but the females were a little bit older on average. That is our lovely health geographers showing you the maps of where the participants came from. So they were largely, it is global. We had Australia, New Zealand, we had parts of Africa, well represented within Europe here, of course, South Asia, and then we had participants from North America. So it's largely this bit here of, East Asia and Eastern Europe, where perhaps the use of the English language might have limited participants, and indeed Latin America. So Central and South America, we didn't have too many respondents. That shows you where the respondents came from the UK, a good spread, but unsurprisingly, a large collection of blobs in the northeast of England, and then good representation from Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, India, of course, and Sri Lanka there. And that shows you the breakdown of the top 7 countries in terms of response. So here are the impact of event scale. The mean scores were 26. So normal is classified as less than or equal to 23, and that was about half the population. But as you can see here, severe psychological impact occurred in nearly 27%. So, about just under half had symptoms, and more than a quarter had severe psychological impact. And just talking through, because this was a mixed method study, I'll just put some of the quotes that talked about the emotional impact. Sorry, this should be COVID-19, apologies, overrode the, I suppose, more rational side of me. We need to concentrate on what is happening rather than what I could. I did go through a tough time for a little bit, for a couple of weeks, where it's just like, well, I remember we had swine flu. Before swine flu, we were working with the county council at the time about mass graves and stuff like that. And all that kind of stuff came flooding back. And it wasn't like it overloaded me. It was just that, this is the thing we'd been planning for so many years. And another respondent said they were extremely anxious at first, to the point where they were going around bleaching door handles 2 or 3 times a day. And even any shopping, they would be bleaching the packaging. And this was a particularly poignant one, talking about, as Shekhar pointed out, about having children stuck at home. And kids were stuck at home, not being able to see their friends or go to school. They started to take it out on their parents naturally, because we're the ones who were stuck with them. So managing that was a completely new task. And of course, my wife was extremely emotional. She'd cry for pretty much anything and blame herself for anything that could go wrong. So managing all of that, it could trickle down to me. So there were points where even I broke down. Why is this happening? Why are people not more concerned about themselves and, the welfare and safety of others? It boiled out in tears and, just cry. They also said there was an impact on their ability to perform, tasks like do their work. It's not easy doing business development when you don't see your clients face to face. The whole, the building, the rapport part, and the hunch from starting, from the handshake itself. The impact of lockdown. Some people felt a little bit resentful. This said that I do feel a little bit resentful that I've been told I can go to work, be around hundreds of people, but I can't go in and see a friend. And I suspect this is probably from somebody from the UK, but I can't be certain. Loss of contact with others. And this was something that came through loud and clear. And rather than read it out, I'll just give you a second to read the quotes, because they really hopefully resonate with all of you. And then not all things were negative. Some people felt that they got the ability to spend more quality time together, more family time. They spent more time together. The pace of life felt a bit more relaxed because working from home, well, you didn't have to, you didn't feel under so much pressure. It just felt relaxed. I suppose the question here would be how long that lasted for, but of course we don't have that data. In terms of coping, the brief COPE subscales were summarized into 4 factors by means of a confirmatory factor analysis into positive thinking COPE, which had these domains, avoidance coping, which had these, social support coping, and other coping. Apologies for the very busy slide, but yeah. Analyses were performed, were done to determine the presence and strength of associations between individual variables and scores. And there is the model where it says CI is that each respondent, the time of doing their survey, their country was experiencing certain mortality, and the vector for the respondent's gender and age, etc. And this was a logistic regression model here. So what we were able to do was confirm whether it was less than or equal to 100 cases on that day, or it was more than 100 cases in the country. And you look here, so this is for cases where there is less than 100. And what they found was that avoidance, apologies, actually it should be more than 100. So avoidance was used irrespective of the impact of event scale scores. So whether it was severe, moderate, mild, or normal. So avoidance stopped getting used when mortality crossed 100. And this was quite a staggering finding. So people stopped using this as a coping mechanism. And here are some quotes about coping that people talked about. And this one really resonated with me in particular. One person said, there's actually 3 bits to this. The protection bit, PPE, is 1 bit. Building up resilience is the other bit. And then there's a kind of psychological kind of change of heart, not getting sucked into fear, is the 3rd bit, which is sort of quite true, actually, if only one can manage not to get sucked into fear. As a doctor, it was horrendous because all of our patients were coming in. The death rates were just unreal. And the sheer numbers were horrendous. The only way to cope was to switch off. So talking about avoidance, people did do that, including healthcare workers. And especially in Asia, most of society is driven by shame and guilt, said this participant. Most people, even if they are upset, will not talk about it. They will be scared to talk about it. People just don't talk about the emotional feelings or focus on mental well-being. I really hope that now this is a bit of an eye-opener and people do start talking about not just how they're feeling physically, but from a psychological perspective. This was a sort of quite a mature take on acceptance, which was, these type of things, most of the time, people on the ground, there's no point in panicking because what's going to happen will happen. There are things that you can do to mitigate, but by and large, you've just got to ride it. What people said helped was having a structure and routine. This person said, I got into a routine of getting up, getting ready to go out, even though I wasn't going out. They would even put makeup on, which I'm not particularly someone who puts on makeup, and would have a shopping bag ready for when I took my daily exercise. The routine and knowing I was to do this every day really helped. Others felt that yoga and meditation was extremely helpful. And then there was talk about being able to have better, healthy, cleaner eating, which you can see the quotes here on the side. The use of virtual platforms. So one person commented, I live alone and Zoom saved my life. Zoom, WhatsApp all helped, but I can't wait to be able to hug my loved ones again. And then this one, I think I really can relate to this one. It isn't me, by the way, who said this. It was actually a participant. Nothing will ever replace my dad's bear hug, but Zoom came a close second during the pandemic. So social media, and I think this is a really interesting take. So we've said the use of social media from our colleagues from Goa Institute of Management and others are all talking about the use of social media is not particularly helpful. But I suppose this distills down to, how much you use it and what you use it for. What is it that you're looking for? So this person started using Twitter, which they never had. I generally just used it to look at funny videos of dogs and things like that. I don't follow anything that's particularly upsetting, and I find it quite useful for life. So half my feed is about medicine, and the other half is dogs and cats, which is a nice mix of educational and cute stuff. That's been quite good for them. So it was an interesting take that maybe it's not all bad, but perhaps how much you use it and what you use it for. Of course, we do have limitations. We've used survey methodology and snowballing. It will inherently have its limitations on the representativeness of the population, but a bit hard to, especially on a global scale in low to middle income countries, to think about ways of doing a project during a global pandemic. We really couldn't go door to door. And of course, as mentioned previously, all the measures were in the English language, as were the qualitative interviews. So just to summarize, psychological impact is common with about a quarter of participants across all studies showing severe impact. This varies from, a quarter to nearly 40 to 50% showing psychological impact, depending on the measures that are being used. Avoidance is common early on, but seems less used as a coping mechanism when mortality starts to get to a tipping point. Virtual platforms help in a limited manner, and social media may also help, but depends on what's being viewed and perhaps for how long. Yoga, healthy eating, exercise, and routines help the most, and perhaps nothing's better than a hug, to summarize. So we are at the moment in the process of, apologies, I didn't mean to stop screen sharing. We are in the process of we've drafted the first manuscript, which has circulated a couple of times. Thank you to all of you that have contributed to the second round of comments. I'm going to have a look at that. I'm sorry, I've been a little bit under the weather ever since I got back from a trip to actually see family in India. But I am now better, and I will start to incorporate and recirculate that. I just wanted to say a huge thanks on behalf of all of us to all of the participants who started, and in particular, a huge thanks to Catherine, who keeps not just the cope with COVID stuff, but NEESAMA going and sending emails. Of course, all of you within NEESAMA and the university's Global Challenges Academy. And this really couldn't have happened without our in-country experts. So Gunjan from Nepal and Ran from Sri Lanka, Ayesha from Bangladesh, Sabahat from Pakistan, Paddy, Shekhar, Divya, and Matthew from India. And from the UK, we've got, of course, got Lynn, Katie, Stella, and Claire. Ellie, who's on the call, Steve, Jackie, who's here, and Pauline Dixon. So thank you a lot to all of you. And that's all I had to say. Just wanted to thank you for bearing with us. You've all done very well to cope with nearly a 4-hour virtual meeting. Any questions or comments? And perhaps what I might do is, whilst you think of questions and comments, if any of the co-investigators, because I know we've got Matthew, we've got Ran, Shekhar, Jackie, Gunjan on, any thoughts or comments? Apologies, couldn't send you the presentation in advance because of me being a bit poorly. Feel free to just unmute yourselves.
one thing that it's lovely seeing that all together, Addy. I know we've talked about it and we've read the manuscript, but actually seeing it presented was really, really helpful. And thanks for pulling that all together. I guess one of the things that it highlights for me, seeing it presented in that way, is just the value of mixed methods, because, you know, having those quotes and the interviews from people really helps to give a more nuanced understanding of some of the statistical analyses. So I'm really pleased that you kind of, you know, drove us forward to do it that way. I think it will be a really much more rounded understanding of people's experiences than if we'd just done one or the other. So it's a comment really rather than a question, but it's just really apparent when you see it presented in that way.
Thank you, Jackie. I wanted to extend what Jackie is saying. And I call this as the poverty of epistemology, where you believe that knowledge comes only from double-blind studies or from traditional research instead of subjectivities of people's experience and the narratives of their lived experience. So I'm really struck by this whole concept of the poverty of epistemology and of knowledge construction. So I echo what Jackie is saying in terms of the power of mixed methods.
Thanks, Shekhar. Ellie?
I suppose it always makes me think when you present it about how in some small way doing that study allowed us to cope. So I think the kernel of the idea came from Addy and I being sat when we were struggling to know what, if anything, we can do. And I suppose it's just thinking about how sometimes our professional roles allow us to manage with things outwards. So it's certainly had that impact for me as we've worked our way through and being able to link in with everybody else's experience across those very different places and systems has been one of the ways that's helped me cope with COVID over the last 18 months.
Thanks, Ellie. It's such a wonderful reminder, you know, having everybody reflect. So you're quite right for reminding, because it certainly prevented me from consuming one massive Cadbury's bar every day, because of course I had decided I'm going to get COVID and I'm going to die. So I think coming back to Ellie's point, it certainly helped me cope. And also, I think it allowed NEESAMA in some ways to flourish. I mean, of course, you'll hear tomorrow about all the lovely webinars and the work that Shekhar, Sambar team, in particular Isha, has done in terms of the second wave. So there's been a lot of stuff happening thanks to NEESAMA. But you know, on the research side, a lot of our projects did ground to a halt. There's been traction and movement, but this allowed that work to continue, which is quite phenomenal. And I think it comes back to the other thing was that we were trying to get a theoretical understanding of what is the impact and what drives the psychological impact, to get some framework to think about how we might support people. So, you know, if there is a need to develop interventions, psychosocial interventions, how do we do that? And I think we're getting, you know, this will add to the body of literature to do that. I can see Matthew is, thank you. Yes, Matthew's just put on the chat that what Ari didn't mention is a large number of meetings and discussions we had. You're absolutely right, Matthew. It was so amazing to see everybody. It used to be 8 a.m. UK time when we all used to dial in, and there was great sign up. I can still remember Gunjan dialing in from delightful restaurants, Ran and colleagues dialing in from, I think at one time, Ran Sarini was on a lovely beach in Sri Lanka, which made Ellie, Jackie and I fairly envious, to say the least. You're absolutely right. We've had very, very many meetings, and I think put a lot of toil, sweat and labor into, and love into this. So you're right, it does echo that. Any other comments or thoughts? I know that Ranjita, it's good to see you on the line, but I suppose some of our findings, I know we didn't interview under 18s, but this kind of work actually mirrors with some of the interim findings that you were presenting as well from your rapid review. So yeah, it's reassuring. Okay, just wanted to let you all know, if you give me one moment, I will tell you what the plan for tomorrow is, sorry, if I can just, so just to end, our plan for tomorrow, and we feel free to be able to attend, is that we'll start again at 9 to 9:30, which just allows people time to join in. And apologies, this should really say Shekhar and Isha, but Isha is going to join us finally. Thanks, Shekhar, for confirming.
You can just put Isha's name because
okay, that's fine.
She will be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she's going to talk about the NEESAMA web.
Double EX.
Yeah, of course. Apologies. So Isha Sharma will talk through about the mental health in the second wave and a series of webinars. And there's an amazing, Be Prepared to Be Dazzled, is a lovely 26-minute film that Shekhar's some of our tech team have produced. So if you thought that today's movie was nice, tomorrow's is even nicer. And then we'll take a little break. Then Gunjan and Mitali will just talk through their experience of attending psychodynamic psychotherapy training course with the registrars in child psychiatry, because tomorrow is focusing on training and service development, and a lot's been going on in terms of that as well. We have invited, we've had quite a few people from, we've had Sultana Algin and a colleague from Sri Lanka, and a couple of colleagues from Nepal attend some British Association for Psychopharmacology training courses. How many of them will be able to attend, I can't predict because we've not heard back from everybody. Then take a small break and then come back, and we've invited Ran and the ECRs just to talk either with PowerPoint or without their experiences of what it's felt to be an early career researcher within the NEESAMA community. And I suppose after that, if we have time and there's still an appetite, we could talk about next steps. Would folk like another half-day event, say in March next year, or do we plan this on an annual basis? Because at the moment, we still don't know whether A, we'll have funding, or more importantly, B, whether the world will be safe enough to meet in Kathmandu. I want to say yes, but yeah. So hope that sounds like a good plan to you all. Any thoughts or comments? We can add something on for tomorrow. There's a little bit more time.
No, this was a very good day. Also, just wanted to share that, with retirement, people do all kinds of interesting work. It will interest you to know that on 23rd, on Saturday, Matthew is actually speaking in the historic St. Mark's Cathedral on national issues and ecumenical relations as far as mental health is concerned, the convergence of faiths. So Matthew's having a real vibrant retirement time. I was just delighted to see that St. Mark's Cathedral is historic because it was built during the British times, and he's speaking in the central hall there at 5 o'clock. I hope it will be available for us to view, because it's a very interesting subject on national issues and ecumenical relations as far as mental health care is concerned.
Absolutely. And Matthew, do you think it's going to be telecast on Zoom or Google or?
I don't know. I must find out.
Would you be able to find out? I can see that. Yeah, we would love to share it, and I'm just thinking this is a sort of news that we would love to, for Maya to put on the NEESAMA website in the news section, obviously with your permission, and share the link if the organizers will be happy for us to share the link.
Yeah, actually this month and last month there's been a lot of webinars because of Mental Health Day and also Alzheimer's Day and Aging Day and so many things. So there's been many. Actually, I can send some YouTube links to some talks that were done. And Shekhar has many YouTube links, of course. You can put all that on the website, I guess.
Absolutely, we'd love to. So I think, as Maya unfortunately, I've still not managed to get her super editing access, but we will get that in the next few days. And the moment she's got it, she can then log in and start editing the remaining bits of the website, and then just making sure it's, because people won't come back in terms of footfall to website unless there's new material. So it's a really good idea to, May I finally got the camera working.
Yeah, thanks.
So you can all see Maya. She's very, very keen to get involved. It's one of her learning objectives over the next year, because we've got her until July 2022. And I suppose the next thing is, once she's got the NEESAMA website up and running, we can also think about, within the NEESAMA community, about, do we start thinking about a social media profile for NEESAMA? But one step at a time. But Matthew, please, if you could find out, we can, if nothing else, share the link via Catherine to the whole NEESAMA community, because I'm certain people will be interested.
Yeah.
If that's a possibility. Yeah, sorry. And Shekhar, of course, we will hound you for your various links as well. I suppose, thank you so much to all of you for being here today on behalf of the steering committee, which includes Shekhar, Jackie, and myself here. Thank you so much for being here and continuing to support and contribute to NEESAMA. It is a sum of its individual parts. So thank you, and see you tomorrow. And warm welcome to all our new people inducted into NEESAMA. That includes Paul and Ranjita and Harshini and Tess and various others. You're in now. It's an alliance that doesn't let go of people easily, but it's not a cult, so it's not a bad place to be.
But to speak about it from the perspective of Gestalt psychology, the whole is more than the sum of the parts.
Absolutely, Shekhar. On that, I think we will just end, because can't be a better summing up. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Everyone, take care.
Tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.